Good morning, everyone, and welcome in here on Live Now from Fox. The time is 7:57 over on the East Coast, and it is 4:57 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here to bring you all of your top stories from across the country and across the world on this Saturday, March 16th, 2024. Do want to call your attention there to the boxes on the right side of your screen. You can see we are covering several stories that are developing related to the Israel-Hamas war, now in day 162. If you look off to the top right-hand side of your screen there, that video released by the Israel Defense Forces does show video they say does indicate that Palestinians actually opened fire on a group of Gazans waiting for aid. This happening on Thursday. We're going to talk more about that video coming up shortly. But the box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen showing the Israel-Gaza border. I do want to start over in Israel with the latest here coming in from Madeline Rivera at Fox News.
As the fighting rides on in the Gaza Strip, Israel's war cabinet is meeting to consider a new ceasefire proposal from Hamas. It's a two-step plan. In the first phase, Hamas would release Israeli women, children, the elderly, and those with health issues in exchange for up to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. After that, both sides would agree on a date for Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, followed by the release of the remaining hostages. It's not yet clear how Israel would respond, but it's unlikely they'd order a full stop to their offensive.
We are willing to pay a heavy price to bring back the hostages, but one thing we will not compromise, and that's our demand, not to stop the war until Hamas is eradicated.
The new proposal was announced just one day after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer suggested Israel hold new elections, a direct shot at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Those comments prompting significant criticism from Israeli officials. Even Benny Gantz, Netanyahu's political rival, called Schumer's suggestion, quote, incorrect and unacceptable. The Biden administration now distancing itself from Schumer's remarks, saying he was speaking for himself, not the White House.
I'm sure that they fully understand that he speaks for himself. He's obviously someone we're in close contact with, but it's not a statement from the executive branch.
Meanwhile, the U.S. released the final draft of a UN resolution aimed at stopping the fighting in Gaza, but it's unclear when it will come up for a vote in the Security Council. In Washington, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
All right, Madeline, thank you so much for that report right there. And I do want to get to this video on your screen. This was released by the IDF not too long ago, as they do say it shows Palestinian gunmen opening fire on a group of people waiting for aid in Gaza City. This comes after the Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry claimed it was Israeli troops who began shooting. The IDF responded, saying it investigated and found Israeli troops did not fire any gunshots. At least 21 people were killed, more than 150 others believed to be wounded in that attack at Kuwait Square. I do want to talk more about all of this and the latest developments on the war itself. So let's bring in Mark Chandler at Coastal Carolina University. He, of course, is the Director of Government Relations and also a former senior defense intelligence official. As always, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break down the latest headlines. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Josh, and good morning.
Good morning. Well, this appears to be the second time that we have seen the IDF release video to kind of provide more detail, more context into a situation where gunshots were fired during a situation where Gaza residents were waiting there for aid. We do have limited information about this latest incident, but your thoughts overall as this is developing and you see that video?
Well, Josh, I saw the release of this video last night, and I looked at this. And first off, let me explain that combat in a combat environment is a very confusing and very chaotic environment out there. And so you mix that and you throw in a civilian and especially a relief supply situation like this, and you're going to create more chaos. But as you look at this, Israel does monitor these convoys through the video. And that's obviously what you have, an unmanned aerial vehicle video playing back on this situation. Now, Israel doesn't control the distribution sites of this. So you look at this, Israel was not engaged. They were not there. But you see a general tendency, as you just pointed out, and I can actually go back to the hospital explosion a few months ago, where Israel was initially blamed for that attack and that explosion, and it later turned out to be Hamas. So I think you're going to find these situations. The tendency, unfortunately, is to immediately blame Israel for such an incident. And so when you start to look at how this plays out, I think you're going to see, let's pause on the initial reporting and then work our way into some evaluation of this, not just blame Israel at first.
And it is important to note that the IDF went and did this investigation almost immediately after hearing of the incident. They hear Hamas's claims and they go and investigate right away. It was that same situation with the hospital attack where they were blamed, and then the situation, just a few weeks ago, also at an aid distribution site. So it is important to note the IDF does go and investigate these incidents, right?
It is very important. And Josh, there have been some incidents where individual or even a small IDF unit has actually done something they're not supposed to do. I'm not going to say it's a violation of the law of armed conflict, but, it violates the principles of military action. And Israel has actually punished some individual soldiers and small units. So I think you need to step back and you need to pause when an incident like this happens. As much as there's pressure on Israel about the security of the refugees and the overwhelming number of civilian casualties in this situation, Israel is trying to maintain in a chaotic combat environment the highest principles it can for conducting these operations in a very, very complex urban warfare situation.
And reports are starting to circulate here that Hamas's #2 military commander, Marwan Issa, has been killed. How significant would that be if he was eliminated there by Israel?
Well, this would be a very significant move. And I believe you're referring to the reports that came out from the IDF earlier in the week, where they conducted an airstrike in Gaza where allegedly Issa was holed up in some of the tunnel networks, along with a few of his deputies. He's the #2 military commander for Hamas. So by taking him out, this would be a significant blow. He was a key planner and coordinator and commander for the October 7th terrorist attacks on Israel. So you look at this would be significant. Now, they need the confirmation. We need to get some DNA data. We need to really confirm that he was there. And they haven't come out and finally concluded that they got him. And you want to be careful with this. This is something the U.S. does all the time. Before we give a final confirmation, we look for that exact DNA data or match. So doing this, Issa he's kind of known as the shadow man, because Israel has been tracking him, trying to locate him for decades. He's been involved in numerous Palestinian terror attacks against Israel. He was one of the masterminds and commanders behind the October 7th attack. So this would be a significant blow to the command and control, the ability to move Hamas fighters around the battlefield if, in fact, he was taken out. And I think also it'll start to show, since Israel is going after the leadership, as you should in a military campaign, it's going to probably strike a little bit of a blow to some of those other leaders and the morale of some of the fighters.
Netanyahu calling that latest proposed deal by Hamas that's been discussed by the war cabinet there, he called it ridiculous and absurd. What do we know about the deal, and how does it compare to the others that have been on the table in the last few months?
Well, there have been several, and obviously Netanyahu has said this before about the last two proposals that Hamas came back with. But he did, after saying that, say that they will discuss it. They had a war cabinet meeting yesterday, and after the conclusion of that, and this is a positive sign, I think, Israel said they are going to send representatives to Qatar to discuss this latest proposal. But what the proposal does from Hamas is it sets up an immediate ceasefire where hostages are released. Now, they talk about elderly women, some elderly individuals, and the sick, but Hamas doesn't give any details there. What is the number? We know that there's about 134 remaining hostages, of which approximately 30 are estimated to be dead at this time. But Israel's looking for names to be released. We haven't seen that through the international community at all at this time. And those hostages, they're key, and Hamas knows that they are key and gives Hamas leverage. So as they work their way through what Hamas is going to do, I think we may see, and I don't want to present too much hope to the viewers, toward the Israelis or anyone looking for a peace deal. But we may see an opening here that we can establish some sort of basic ceasefire and get some hostages released. Now, Hamas has called for up to 1,000 Palestinians to be released, some of those serving life sentences. And those serving life sentences were the ones who killed Israeli citizens, committed terrorist attacks. And so now you're talking about a significant trade-off in what's going to happen. The sticking points overall in this deal, Hamas wants a complete ceasefire and a complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces. Israel wants all the hostages back and the elimination of Hamas as a fighting force. So I think what you see is those two opposing positions right there are going to prevent a long-term ceasefire. But the fact that Israel sent a delegation to talk gives me a little bit of hope that we may see a small breakthrough here in the near future.
Netanyahu also saying that he has approved a plan, an IDF plan here for the Rafah offensive, something that we have been talking about for weeks at this point. The U.S. has actually said that they want it to be more of a targeted effort. They don't want it to be a large-scale operation. Is Israel likely to listen to the U.S. on that front, or are they likely to move ahead with their large-scale operation that essentially has been planned now for quite a while?
Well, I don't think Israel's going to listen to the U.S. on how to conduct military operations. And if I were in Israel's shoes, I wouldn't either. Because you have your military objectives that Israel has set out, and that's the elimination of Hamas. Now, Rafah is a key component to Iraq. There's at least 4 battalions, and what that equals is several thousand Hamas fighters who are positioned in the Rafah area. So what you're looking at, and I believe what Netanyahu approved, although no one has seen the specific details, would be a phased campaign to move into Rafah. One of the key components that Israel has stated they will do, it's what U.S. has called for, the international community has called for, is the evacuation of the refugees, about 1.3 million refugees. This is a difficult task. It's made even more difficult by the fact that Hamas will likely refuse to allow many of those refugees to get out. They'll stop them through military action, or they'll stop them through some sort of coercion. But Israel, first phase, will start to get those citizens out, those refugees out of there. Hopefully the international community can help that. And then what I think you're going to see, and it's really happened in Khan Yunis, so Israel's adjusted its tactics to more targeted, more precise operations when they identify through an intensive intelligence effort, the location of these Hamas strongholds in the tunnels and fighting areas. So you're going to see phase 2 probably consist of directed or specific artillery strikes along with air strikes to go after those Hamas strongholds before you see the ground forces move in. And when I think you see the ground forces move in, it'll be in the smaller scale tactics and smaller scale units that they've been conducting up in Khan Yunis. So a couple of things. One, they have to finish in Khan Yunis. There's still resistance, Hamas resistance there. And if they move too soon to Rafah, that leaves them vulnerable to attacks from that area. So secure Khan Yunis, evacuate the refugees out of that area, and then start with a specific targeted campaign. So you're not going to see an attack into Rafah tomorrow. But I think as you start to phase this over the next few weeks, you could see operations step up there. But look for getting those refugees out of there and starting that first. And hopefully Israel will get some help in that.
Let's talk a little bit more about the U.S.-Israel relationship, because just a few days ago, headlines were made when Chuck Schumer gave about a 40-minute speech on the Senate floor. He said Netanyahu has lost his way, and he did call for a new election there in Israel. We do know Schumer is the highest-ranking Jewish official there in the government. So my question for you, does that show any sort of shift there in the U.S. and Israel relationship to hear those words from Schumer?
Well, Josh, I really don't like to jump into politics that much, but what I'm looking at right here is pure political drama out there. And I don't think it's positive political drama that Schumer started with this. First off, it's not good when you go out and publicly criticize a Democratic ally, and you start to publicly criticize that ally that that is in combat operations, that's fighting for not necessarily its sheer existence, but the continued peace and prosperity for the region. So you look at that. I think what you're really seeing here is kind of a smear Netanyahu campaign, because this was, and it's not publicly acknowledged, the known facts that Schumer was going to do this was relayed to the White House. And I think you see that reiterated when President Biden came out and reinforced, if you will, what Schumer said. He didn't push back on that. Now, speaking specifically to what Schumer said, if the Israeli country, if the Israelis wanted a new leader, they have a parliamentary system. They could right now establish a vote of no confidence, and then they could have to form a new government, a coalition forces. But you've had a solidified war cabinet that started out on October 8th, the day after the attacks, and they've stayed together. Is there dissension? Of course there is. There is in any kind of situation like this, in any kind of governing coalition. But I think if the Israeli people, in a vast, overwhelming majority, wanted Netanyahu out, there is a way to do that right now. So I think we have to trust in the Israelis themselves to see how they want to proceed with this campaign to eliminate the Hamas terrorist organizations. And it's really not the United States' goal to start to interfere in another country's, especially an ally's, government and governing process. So I think there's a lot of anti-Netanyahu in this approach that using Schumer to voice things. And it's in a political year. The far left and the progressive side of the Democratic Party, and again, I'm talking politics, is starting to push. And in this election year, I think you see politics being played here and play into a certain element of that Democratic Party, that Democratic left-wing aspect.
I do want to go to the north right now, take a live look here at the Israel-Lebanon border as we talk a little bit more about the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, we do know that there's a French plan for a truce between Israel and Hezbollah that is being discussed right now. Is it possible for there to be any sort of truce between Israel and Hezbollah? Because days ago, we're talking hundreds or more than 100 rockets were fired from Lebanon into Israel. So the fighting is intensifying there. Is a truce even possible between the two?
Anything is possible, Josh. So when I look at the elements of this, though, and you have to understand the French have a history in Lebanon. They have a history in Syria and the Middle East. So I think they're trying to use some of their history and leverage within Lebanon to try to push this peace proposal. But as I look at the peace proposal, it's actually a reiteration of the existing UN mandate that stems from the 2006 Israeli-Lebanese Hezbollah war. And so I look at that. For example, there's talk of pushing Hezbollah forces further away from the Israeli border. Well, that's in existence in that UN mandate today, that there are supposed to be no Hezbollah forces within 18 miles of the border. And so what we're looking at is trying to really reestablish the existing UN mandate. And so I don't know that's really going to go forward in the current environment that you have. And the key thing, the French gave this proposal to Lebanon. Lebanon has no authority or pressure that they can levy against the Lebanese Hezbollah. So if Hezbollah does not agree to this, there will not be any kind of peace arrangement. And the U.S. has had an envoy going back and forth trying to work the same issue. But Hezbollah has to agree. It doesn't matter what they say in Beirut, what Lebanon says. If Hezbollah doesn't agree, there won't be one.
When we do talk about Hezbollah, again, just days ago, we had more than 100 rockets that were fired into northern Israel. There's been a lot of fighting back and forth. So why at this point has Israel not officially declared war against Hezbollah? We know it was very quick to declare war against Hamas after the October 7th attack.
Well, I think Israel is, and I hate to say it like this, but you look at they're familiar with the Hezbollah enemy. And they face these kind of attacks sporadically throughout the time. So what we're trying to do is, this would be a lose-lose proposition to declare war on Hezbollah at this time. And I want to characterize this in a military term we would use is, Israel's conducting what we call a holding operation to the north. So they're doing this through a series of retaliatory strikes, and you've addressed. I mean, Hezbollah has attacked Israel with rockets or missiles almost every day this week. Not just the 100 barrage that you mentioned earlier, but the fact that it's an almost daily occurrence. And then Israel strikes back. And in showing the intelligence intensive aspects to this operation, Israel's starting to strike a little bit deeper and focus on some leadership and planning cells to stop future attacks. So I think this holding action allows Israel to have the right amount of forces there while concentrating their main effort down in Gaza, while preventing a wide-scale war up to the north. This would be very destructive for northern Israel. There's over 100,000 Israeli citizens who have been displaced in the north. And so I don't think Israel wants to see that kind of destruction up north. And Hezbollah, they're keeping this just below that threshold that I've talked about, enough to inflict confusion and a little bit of pain on northern Israel, but not enough to warrant an overwhelming Israeli response that will destroy significant Hezbollah infrastructure in the southern part of Lebanon.
And my last question for you here, I do want to talk a little bit more about the situation with Yemen's Houthi rebels, because they claim to have a new hypersonic missile in their arsenal. How significant is something like that? I mean, when you hear hypersonic missile, that just sounds very destructive and powerful.
Well, Josh, this is a good question. And this is actually something I used in all of my classes this week to have the students talk about the credibility of such a report. Some reports of this came out of a Russian news agencies. So let me characterize hypersonics. Hypersonic missile technology is very sophisticated and very advanced. I mean, these missiles fly at thousands of miles an hour. There is no missile defense capability against any hypersonic missile that exists in the world. There are two nations in the world who have proven operational hypersonic capability. And those nations are Russia and China, with China being the most advanced. Now, Iran came out a couple of weeks ago and claimed that they tested a hypersonic missile capability. I believe that our intelligence, United States intelligence, has the sophisticated collection capability to know if a third country has this capability. And so we haven't come out and acknowledged that Iran has that. I don't believe they have the technological capability to do this. The Houthis certainly do not have the technological capability to develop such a missile system like this. Now, what I think they may be alluding to, or at least trying to create some concern, and this is why I would not ignore this report, is the Houthis early in the week at the start of Ramadan came out and said they're going to expand their operations into the Indian Ocean and down south to the Cape of Good Hope, which goes around the southern part of the African continent. So they may have, through Iran, smuggled in some sort of long-range ballistic missile capability that can strike out. I mean, Iran has a significant, probably one of the largest missile capabilities in the world that it's exporting to Russia and obviously the Houthis. So maybe there's some sort of new missile or longer range missile that got into the Houthis' hands that they might be alluding to a threat. I would be very critical of saying that the Houthis had a hypersonic capability.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds very powerful, and it's something that a lot of people have discussed just because of the strength of something like that. So thank you so much for helping to break that down for us. Is there anything else you want to add about any of this here before I let you go?
Well, Josh, just to tie on to the end of the Houthi situation, I think we've seen an uptick in attacks this week, almost every day, but we've seen at least 15 different Houthi attacks and using over 60 different types of munitions. So they've expanded attacks against U.S. naval vessels, commercial vessels, French and UK combat vessels. So you see a lot of this attacking continue to take place, not only in the Red Sea, but also in the Gulf of Aden. So they're expanding their operations. They are not deterred, and their capability hasn't been destroyed. So I put that into context. And then another thing that kind of goes to this ceasefire agreement, and I'll be very brief on this, and that's the Palestinian Authority Abbas, the president, replaced the prime minister. If you recall, a few weeks ago, the prime minister resigned. He replaced the prime minister with an ally of his. So someone who's been responsible for kind of rebuilding efforts in Gaza, the West Bank. That's a positive move to try to create some sense of order out of a very disorganized Palestinian Authority. However, Hamas spoke out against that. And they spoke out that they didn't have any support for the new prime minister. So I think what you see is you go forward with ceasefire talks, the dissension, the breakdown, and the inability of governance of the Palestinian Authority is a weak link, not only in negotiations, but in any move forward post-combat.
All right. Mark Chandler, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and break down all the latest headlines. These developments happening a lot, so there is always a lot to discuss. Thank you again for being here with us today.
You're welcome, Josh. My pleasure as always, and hope you have a great day.
You too. And we are taking a live look here at one of our many cameras across the Middle East. This is a shot of Jerusalem there in Israel. We also have this shot showing a look at northern Israel coming in from the Associated Press. It is a very high quality camera, so that's why it looks as though it is shaking and all over the place there. We do also have this one showing the Israel-Lebanon border as the fighting does continue between Israel and Hezbollah. We've talked a lot about it, but missiles fired by Hezbollah pretty much every day over the last week, including one day when more than 100 rockets were fired there. Let's head to a quick 2-minute commercial break, the first one of the hour here at 8:23 on the East Coast and 5:23 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here to bring you all of your top stories from across the country and the world. On the other side of this break, we're going to hear from some of the comments that were made by the House Republicans in response to Chuck Schumer's comments on the floor. He did speak for about 40 minutes and said that Israel needs to hold an election and Netanyahu has lost his way. So we are going to play those comments for you here, raw and unfiltered. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over at the Israel-Gaza border. That is a view from Israel looking into Gaza. Now, President Biden expressing support for Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer after the senator called for new elections in Israel, the latest sign that the U.S. relationship with its closest Middle East ally is starting to head towards some fracture here over that war in Gaza. Schumer, who is a Jewish Democrat from New York, sent tremors through both countries this week when he said that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has, quote, lost his way and warned that, quote, Israel cannot survive if it becomes a pariah as the Palestinian death toll does continue to grow. Biden said in the Oval Office, quote, he made a good speech. I think he expressed serious concern shared not only by him, but by many Americans. We did hear from House GOP members. They spoke for about 5 minutes as they addressed this in West Virginia. I do want to play those comments for you here. They include Speaker Mike Johnson.
Good afternoon. We are here at the House Republican Issues Conference, and as we were in a work session here within the last half hour, there was a buzz among the audience as people were seeing notices come across their phone as something that was rather shocking to us. We saw the remarks from Senator Chuck Schumer calling for new elections in Israel. And we want to speak very clearly and concisely to say that this is not only highly inappropriate, it's just plain wrong for an American leader to play such a divisive role in Israeli politics while our closest ally in the region is in an existential battle for its very survival. We need to be standing with Israel, and we need to give our friends and allies our full support. We have to stand with and support them right now, but what you're seeing from the White House and clearly from the Senate Democrats is really exactly the opposite. They seem to be standing with and supporting Iran and its proxies instead. This is an extension of the Democrats' foreign policy that has projected weakness on the world stage and undermined our allies around the world. The most important election, in our view, is not what may happen in Israel, but the one that is needed right here in the United States. It will happen in November, and it cannot get here soon enough.
It's disturbing to see the Senate Majority Leader attacking our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel, at this time of war. You go back to October 7th, and you watched Hamas commit barbaric acts of murder against Israelis, murdering Jews, murdering babies, taking hostages, some that are still held today. And as hostages are still being held, in Israel, who we have always stood by and supported their right to defend themselves as a Jewish state, is under attack, to have Senate Majority Leader Schumer attacking the democratically elected leadership of Israel is disgraceful. And the fact that he won't give that same kind of criticism to Hamas, to Iran, who continues to support terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah and others who want to do harm to people who believe in freedom around the world, starting with our ally Israel. The United States, since the formation of the Jewish state of Israel, has always stood by our ally. And in fact, there's really been no daylight between our two countries for a long, long time. It is sad to see that in Washington, the Democratic Party is starting to fracture and move away from that. Needs to stop. They need to look in the mirror and recognize who our friends are and who our enemies are. And if you can't tell the difference, you don't have the responsibility to lead. That's what's at stake here. Senator Schumer owes an apology to the people of Israel who elected their leadership. But keep in mind, this is the same man who stood on the steps of the Supreme Court and threatened them. This isn't a time for games. This is a time to stand with your friends who are under attack and show no daylight between the United States and Israel. The House Republican leadership continues to show that. We passed a bill to give Israel the aid that they need, and Senator Schumer won't bring that bill to the Senate floor. We're going to continue to stand with Israel in their right to defend themselves against terrorists like Hamas. With that, I'm going to bring up our whip.
Chuck Schumer calling for the U.S. to meddle in Israel's elections is unprecedented and very dangerous. If he wanted to focus on elections overseas, maybe he should have called for an election in Gaza instead. I'll remind you that there hasn't been an election in Gaza since Hamas took over in 2006. Israel is our strongest ally and the only freestanding democracy in the Middle East. We should do everything we can to support them, not undermine them as they fight for their very existence against barbaric terrorists. Schumer called Netanyahu a, quote, obstacle to peace. I think Israelis would agree that Hamas is the obstacle to peace. Our Democrats, Chuck Schumer et al., the White House, they have a problem. But it's not with Netanyahu. It is with the anti-Israel members of their own party that have taken over the woke left. While they choose Hamas, House Republicans will continue to stand with Israel.
House Republicans are about to be joined by Israeli Ambassador Herzog to address members for a conversation during today's lunch because we understand as House Republicans the gravity of what our most precious ally Israel is facing. October 7th was the deadliest day in history for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And Ambassador Herzog will today give an update on the war effort to destroy Hamas, highlight the fact that hostages are still being held by Hamas in Gaza, and making the case for much-needed military aid supported by Republicans that's currently being held up by Chuck Schumer and Democrats in the Senate. Israel is not only fighting for its right to exist, it's fighting for the rights of Jewish people everywhere. And instead of meddling in elections of a sovereign nation, Chuck Schumer should follow House Republicans' lead in supporting our ally in their darkest hour. The obstacle to peace is Democrat leader Chuck Schumer, who has refused to pass the Israeli aid package, which supports our ally Israel as they fight Iranian-backed Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists. This same Israeli aid package that Joe Biden issued an unprecedented veto threat for. House Republicans proudly stand with Israel. We are proud to host Ambassador Herzog here today, and we want to continue to stand up and make sure that we are crystal clear. Chuck Schumer does not stand with Israel. House Republicans do. Thank you very much.
All right, so House members there, the GOP, are responding to those comments that were made by Senator Chuck Schumer as he essentially said that Netanyahu was an obstacle that needed to be passed for peace to happen there in the Middle East. He also called for an election in Israel, and the House GOP responding, saying that everything he said they do not agree with there. 8:34 over on the East Coast and 5:34 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here to bring you all of your top stories from across the country and the world. We're going to head to a quick 2-minute commercial break, but we'll be right back with more live, raw, and unfiltered coverage here on the other side. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Much more to come. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over beautiful New York City right now as we prepare for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. A lot of excitement ready to get underway there. Do want to bring in Nick Koser over at Fox Weather for a look at what's going on, and I'm sure folks are getting pretty excited, Nick, because, I mean, it's coming up soon.
Yeah, coming up soon. The parade starts here at 11. It's going to be marching right behind me. This is Fifth Avenue, and it's shut down already. You can start to see people getting their view and their seats as they're lining the barricaded streets from 44th to 79th. We are outside of beautiful St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is the place to be here this St. Patrick's Day Eve, as the 8:30 Mass just got going, and tons of people have already made their way into St. Patrick's Cathedral. 150,000 people are going to be marching in this parade. It's the oldest St. Patrick's Day parade that you're going to find. It started back in the 1700s, over 260 years old. About 1 million people typically descend on the streets to watch this thing. This is one of them. Sir, you're from Ireland, yeah?
I'm originally from Belfast, but I moved here in 1982, so that's how many years is that?
A long time.
You know, yeah.
Do you come to the parade often?
I haven't missed a parade since 1982.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So you're here every St. Patrick's Day.
Every St. Patrick's Day.
What's the best part of the parade?
Nothing.
Wait a second. You're supposed to say something deep and profound. Nothing.
You know, honestly, whenever the pipes come down, the first group of guys come down playing the pipes, it's glorious, you know. I feel like I'm on a battlefield ready to go to war, you know.
I hear you. And you're here for a good cause.
I am. I'm actually sponsoring a soup kitchen in the East Village. It's, if you look it up on Instagram, it's called interfaith_NYC. And they do over 300 meals every day in the city. They're vegetarian meals, vegan meals, a very traditional Irish meal.
So no corned beef, but a lot of cabbage.
No corn, yes, that's it.
Yeah.
But very healthy food. And we've been doing this program for the last 19 years and haven't missed a day yet in 19 years, rain or shine.
Awesome.
So every St. Patrick's Day we come out and we give out a couple of good-looking Irish hats.
Hey.
And
that's good.
We're hoping that the Fox guys will give a massive contribution.
Well, look, I've already got my headband, so I'm good on the headwear. But best of luck. Thanks for chatting.
God bless.
And enjoy.
And, hey, folks, good to see you. Hope to see you at the St. Patrick's Day parade. If not, wish us luck.
That's right.
And,
appreciate your time,
thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
So there you have it. And yeah, everybody. I mean, you got to give it up for the boys in blue. Everybody's wearing green today, but law enforcement's out helping to control the chaos a little bit, make sure that we're all safe. So our hats off to them. And with that, I think, Josh, that about covers it. I'm just excited to see everybody come down the road here. Again, the parade steps off at 11, so we've got a little time to go. And this place is really going to fill up here quickly, I have a feeling.
I really want to be friends with that guy. I'm glad you found him because you found a new friend out there. He seems very excited.
Yeah, he's a smooth operator. I've been listening to his sales pitch. He's trying to get donations for those hats, and he's good. He could sell water to a whale. So I'm sure that soup kitchen will be drowning in dollar bills here by the time he's done today.
All right, Nick Koser over at Fox Weather. Thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, and don't forget to watch Fox Weather. You can watch everywhere that you watch Live Now from Fox, or the easiest way, just go to any browser and type in Watch Fox Weather. Then you basically just click on the play button and you can see it there. Don't forget to download the Fox Weather app as well. You can find it in the Google App Store, the Google Play Store, really anywhere that you download your apps. It does have a pretty nifty radar and alerts that go right to your phone when there is a watch or warning in your area. And as you heard Nick say, that parade in New York City is expected to get underway at 11 a.m. So we're going to bring you all of that here on Live Now from Fox. There are so many parades that are going to take place, including several that start at noon and 1 o'clock. And we know you guys out there like some parades. So we'll make sure to play those. Also, don't forget, Jeanne Francine is going to be hosting a St. Patrick's Day parade special out of Dublin, Ireland. Sadly, she's not getting to go to Dublin, but we are going to have guests from there, and the parade is taking place there. This is all going to begin tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time and runs until about 10. Let's head to a quick break, and we'll get right back into your headlines here on the other side. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox. As we do get back into the headlines, Judge Scott McAfee issuing his ruling Friday morning on the motions to disqualify Fulton County DA Fani Willis and her office from the Georgia election interference case against former President Trump and several others. Although McAfee stated that the defendants failed to prove that the district attorney acquired an actual conflict of interest in the case through her personal relationship and recurring travels with her lead prosecutor, McAfee asserted that the established record now highlights a significant appearance of impropriety that affects the current structure of the prosecution team, an appearance that must be addressed by the state through the selection of one of two options. Either Willis or Wade must go. As we learned later on in the day, Wade did submit his resignation, and it was accepted by Willis. Our Fox 5 Atlanta team breaks down all of it.
You're confused. You think I'm on trial. These people are on trial for trying to steal an election in 2020.
That trial is now back on track, following a judge's ruling that allows Fani Willis to remain in charge of the election interference case. In his 23-page ruling, Judge Scott McAfee decided the evidence did not establish the district attorney's receipt of a material financial benefit as a result of her decision to hire and engage in a romantic relationship with Wade. Defense attorneys for 9 of the 15 remaining defendants argued Nathan Wade was hired primarily because he was dating Willis, and the two vacationed together with Wade, spending what the court determined was as much as $15,000 on his boss. But the couple, who say they only started dating after he was hired and also broke up shortly before last August's indictment, testified Willis paid or reimbursed Wade for roughly half of those expenses, and all in cash.
You don't have a single solitary deposit slip to corroborate or support any of your allegations that you were paid by Mrs. Willis in cash, do you?
No, sir.
Not a single solitary one.
Not a one.
That seemed to satisfy the judge. Simply put, the defendants have not presented sufficient evidence indicating that the expenses were not roughly divided evenly. McAfee did agree the relationship was, quote, a tremendous lapse in judgment. But he refused to disqualify Willis from the case, instead giving her this option. The district attorney may choose to step aside, along with the whole of her office, and refer the prosecution to the prosecuting attorney's counsel for reassignment. Alternatively, Special Prosecutor Wade can withdraw, allowing the district attorney, the defendants, and the public to move forward without his presence or remuneration, distracting from and potentially compromising the merits of this case.
You know, they ain't just giving this to black men.
The judge also wrote that this fiery speech by Willis accusing her critics of racism created dangerous waters for the DA and was legally improper. But McAfee ruled it did not cross the line to deny defendants a fair trial.
And as we know, we mentioned that Wade did resign just yesterday, hours after that ruling came down, and Willis did accept his resignation. Our Fox 5 Atlanta team has been all over this story. Not only did they break down the situation and the ruling itself, but they also spoke with lawmakers to get their reaction. Want to play that here on Live Now from Fox.
Both Judge McAfee and DA Willis are incumbents. I speak with two panelists of Fox 5's The Georgia Gang. Here's their take.
I think it's too early to tell because there's so many factors.
Judge Scott McAfee's ruling to let DA Fani Willis stay on the election interference case could factor heavily in this year's political campaign.
Yes, there will be some people that will push back. Yes, there will be some people that would disagree with the decision.
McAfee, a Republican, is up for re-election as Superior Court judge in Fulton County. Theron Johnson is a Democratic strategist.
Right now in March, then you have to basically side with the incumbent.
McAfee faces opposition from lawyer and talk show host Robert Patillo and Tiffany Johnson, a former staff attorney for a Fulton County judge.
I think that Judge McAfee comes out on this clean.
Politically, I think Judge McAfee is in serious political trouble.
Phil Kent is a Republican strategist. He says McAfee is vulnerable.
He could lose. My phone blew up with a lot of Republicans saying, I'm not voting for this guy.
Willis, a Democrat, faces challenges for her job as Fulton County DA from Christian Wise Smith, another Democrat, and Republican Courtney Kramer. Unseating her will be tough.
It would be very difficult to dislodge her politically, and I think a Republican would have a really tough time in November.
The primary is set for May 21st, the generals November 5th. At Fulton County Courthouse, Christopher King, Fox 5 News.
And a big thank you to our Fox 5 Atlanta team. We also had Brooke Zahner join us just yesterday as the news was breaking there regarding the ruling. Once again, Willis could either fire Wade or remove herself and her office from the case. We do know that hours later, Wade resigned from his position. So that trial there, that case is now back on track. 8:50 over on the East Coast and 5:50 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here to bring you all of your top stories from across the country and across the world. Want to take you out to some of our live cameras that we do have right here as we get to political news. We are taking a live look over at the White House there in D.C. We were live as we did see President Biden speak with the leaders of Ireland who were there over at the White House ahead of St. Patrick's Day. Fox News actually putting together more of what we saw during that meeting between the two leaders.
President Biden and other leaders hosted an Irish delegation ahead of St. Patrick's Day weekend. It's typically a lighthearted occasion.
My grandfather Finney used to say, "May the hinge of our friendship never go rusty."
But this year, wars in Gaza and Ukraine were top of mind for the leaders.
We're standing together to support Ukraine in the face of Putin's onslaught, the savagery.
Obviously keen to talk about the situation in Gaza as well. You'll know my view that we need to have a ceasefire as soon as possible to get food and medicine in, to get hostages out, and we need to talk about how we can make that happen and move towards a two-state solution.
The meeting comes a day after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called for new elections in Israel.
He made a good speech, and I think he expressed a serious concern, shared not only by him but by many Americans.
Both President Biden and Ireland's Prime Minister called on Congress to pass funding for Israel and Ukraine. House Speaker Mike Johnson still pushing for U.S. border reform, but agreeing the U.S. and Ireland need to stick together.
Our hearts are heavy in spite of the fun fellowship, because stability is being threatened in Europe and in the Middle East, and our allies and friends such as Israel and Taiwan continue to fight for their very right to exist.
Both sides are hopeful peace talks between Israel and Hamas could lead to a ceasefire in Gaza, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved a military plan to move into the southern region of Rafah. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
A big thank you to Connor Hansen there, 8:52 on the East Coast and 5:52 on the West Coast. We're going to head to our final 2-minute commercial break of the hour, and on the other side, a guest will join us to talk more about another issue for Boeing, another part of a plane flying off mid-air. This happening just yesterday, so I want to break down the situation with Boeing. That is coming up here in just 2 short minutes. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and I do want to get back into the headlines as yet another incident involving a Boeing airplane. A United Airlines flight landing Friday with a missing panel from the plane believed to have fallen mid-flight. The Boeing 737 left San Francisco International Airport for Medford, Oregon, with 139 passengers on board, as well as 6 crew members. United Airlines and Boeing have been in the spotlight with several incidents stemming from recent flights. We've brought those to you here on Live Now. On March 4th, a flight from Houston to Florida was forced to return after flames were seen, quote, spewing from one of its engines within 15 minutes of the flight. Then March 7th, a plane that was bound for Japan and departed from San Francisco there lost a tire, landing atop cars and forcing a landing at LAX. The following day, a United Airlines flight in Houston went off the taxiway and into a grassy area. No injuries were reported, and we spoke with someone on the plane who said it was one of the scariest things they have ever experienced. That same day, in the afternoon, another United flight involving an Airbus made an emergency landing at LAX after a hydraulics problem was discovered. That flight destined for Mexico City and carried 105 passengers with 5 crew members. Weeks earlier, a United flight from San Francisco to Boston was diverted to Denver after one of its wings was damaged. And in January, the video you were seeing there, an Alaska Airlines flight suffered a blowout door that eventually led to hundreds of canceled flights and the temporary grounding of Boeing 737 MAX 9s. Again, that you'll see in a second is video from the incident. I want to talk about all of this. Let's bring in Keith Jeffries, the former federal security director at LAX and the vice president of K2 Security Screening Group. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it. Good morning to you.
Of course. Good morning. Well, first off, obviously, as I read those incidents off, there is a lot of them over a fairly short period of time. What do you make of those incidents overall?
Well, Josh, that's certainly concerning for all of us. And 2024 certainly hasn't been very kind to Boeing, to say the least. And you could argue that the last 6 or 7 years, it hasn't been very kind to them. And so it begs the question, I think we all have to ask, has Boeing sacrificed quality over profit? And I think through the NTSB and the FAA and what they're looking into with all of these incidents, we're certainly going to find out. But they have a quality control issue. There's no doubt.
And I know this might be a tough question to answer, but just roughly speaking, how many of the commercial planes in service are Boeing? Are we talking a majority of those flights? Because we've heard so many of these stories.
Yeah, great question, Josh. There's about 10,000 of the commercial aircrafts that are out there. About 45% of the market, 42 to 45% of the market are actually Boeing aircraft.
I'm glad you had that number because I was very curious. Now, are we seeing more incidents like these, or are we just hearing more about them in a time of social media where folks happen to have, their cameras rolling and they're sharing these stories on social media?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think the fact that everyone does have a camera available to them, we're hearing about it. The information, when something like this happens, spreads extremely quickly. And with the track record of all of those incidents you just mentioned previously, it certainly catches the attention. And so I think it's both. I think it's actually both.
What impact, if any, are these situations likely to have on air travel altogether?
So I think it's obvious that Boeing has some trust issues. They have trust issues with one of their clients, which is obviously the airlines. They sell those aircraft to the airlines. They got some trust issues with the regulators, the NTSB and the FAA, based on reports that I've read and heard from other colleagues. And of course, they've got trust issues with the flying passengers. I'm confident that they'll work through some of those issues, but they definitely have a public relations trust issue on their hands at right now.
And that might really be an understatement at this point. What are the options for Boeing overall?
Well, anybody in the aviation industry knows that you got to put safety first. So I think that we would like to think that Boeing has always had it there. They need to just remind them and their entire corporation exactly that safety first. Cooperate with all of the regulators. Obviously, that's important. And put the focus, as I mentioned earlier, on quality versus profit. And that trust and the safety will improve along with that quality improvement. There's no doubt.
Could we actually see a grounding of all Boeing aircraft as this investigation does progress, as we see all of these incidents start to kind of stack up?
Well, anything is possible, Josh. I mean, so I don't want to rule that out. It's probably unlikely, but it's not just Boeing, right? There's a partnership. It's everyone else involved, from the ground crews of these aircraft, the airline industry, as I mentioned earlier, the FAA and NTSB. It's everybody working together to make sure that we can find those gaps in those safety issues and quality control issues. And there's no doubt that Boeing has that at the top of their list as well to improve that.
Is enough being done to, I guess, combat the fears regarding air travel as these incidents do play out? Are we hearing enough, and is enough being done overall?
Well, we're certainly hearing about them, right? What we're not hearing about is what corrective action is being done, because that takes time. That's not criticism on Boeing or anyone else. There's no rush to success to find out what these safety issues are. But let's face it, Boeing is a very reputable American company that's been around since 1916. They've had many peaks and valleys along their way. I'm confident that they're going to get these things fixed. It's just going to take some time. And certainly, I know they're working hard to do just that.
Any advice you have for people who are concerned about flying following all of these incidents?
Yeah, certainly the concern is warranted. If you are flying, make sure you listen to the flight attendant. Safety is paramount for everyone, right? Just listen to those rules and instructions. And by the way, it's spring break. If you are traveling, have fun, safe travels. Everything's going to be okay. Just trust everybody involved working in that partnership. We'll get these safety issues and quality control issues taken care of.
Yes, stay safe, and for spring breakers, behave is probably the best advice there. Keith Jeffries, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us to break down the latest information. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
No, nothing at all, Josh. You have a great weekend, and I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, you too. Thank you again for being here with us.
You bet.
All right, everybody, the time is now 9:02 over on the East Coast and 6:02 on the West Coast. I do want to get back into your headlines here as we follow the latest developments out of the Middle East. You are taking a live look over Jerusalem at this hour. We know there's been a lot of discussion about this future ceasefire deal, the possibility of it. Netanyahu, the prime minister in Israel, is calling this deal that was proposed by Hamas absurd and ridiculous. Madeline Rivera with Fox News breaking down all the latest on that for us.
As the fighting grinds on in the Gaza Strip, Israel's war cabinet is meeting to consider a new ceasefire proposal from Hamas. It's a two-step plan. In the first phase, Hamas would release Israeli women, children, the elderly, and those with health issues in exchange for up to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. After that, both sides would agree on a date for Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, followed by the release of the remaining hostages. It's not yet clear how Israel would respond, but it's unlikely they'd order a full stop to their offensive.
We are willing to pay a heavy price to bring back the hostages, but one thing we will not compromise, and that's our demand, not to stop the war until Hamas is eradicated.
The new proposal was announced just one day after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer suggested Israel hold new elections, a direct shot at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Those comments prompting significant criticism from Israeli officials. Even Benny Gantz, Netanyahu's political rival, called Schumer's suggestion, quote, incorrect and unacceptable. The Biden administration now distancing itself from Schumer's remarks, saying he was speaking for himself, not the White House.
I'm sure that they fully understand that he speaks for himself. He's obviously someone we're in close contact with, but it's not a statement from the executive branch.
Meanwhile, the U.S. released the final draft of a UN resolution aimed at stopping the fighting in Gaza, but it's unclear when it will come up for a vote in the Security Council. In Washington, Madeline Rivera, Fox News.
All right, Madeline, thank you so much for that report. And I do want to stick with some international news here as we get to the latest out of Russia. You can see video of folks casting their ballots during this three-day presidential election that began on Friday. It's essentially a foregone conclusion that Putin will be elected to another six-year term. Alex Hogan breaks it down.
Voters in Russia are heading to the polls, but who will win the country's 8th presidential election is something of a foregone conclusion. Longtime leader Vladimir Putin is widely expected to coast to another big victory, winning a 5th term as Russia's president after killing, jailing, or exiling most of his opponents. Despite the anticipated Putin victory, reaction was largely mixed on the streets of Moscow. Some voters are strongly backing the president, while others say they're hoping for change.
Life is very difficult now. We're coping for now, but I hope it will be a little better.
What do I expect? That everything will be fine, that he will make our country better, and that we will move forward.
Of course, this election is being carried out against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Ukraine. In parts of the countries occupied by Russia, tremendous pressure is being exerted on locals to head to the polls, part of a broader strategy to annex those regions both politically and culturally.
We got direct threats like, if you don't get a Russian passport, you won't be able to go to the store, anywhere, complete isolation in your home.
And Putin is accusing the Ukrainians of trying to sabotage the election in eastern Ukraine, issuing an ominous new threat to Kyiv.
The regime is trying to carry out a number of criminal attacks with the aim of disrupting the voting process. These attacks will not go unpunished.
The Kremlin also says that the U.S. is trying to interfere with the election. The White House calls those allegations categorically false. In London, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
Alex, thank you so much for that report there. As we mentioned, it is a foregone conclusion that Putin will be reelected to another 6-year term. So we will make sure, of course, to bring you those results. It is a 3-day presidential election and will wrap up tomorrow. After weeks of violence and chaos in Haiti, pressure is building on the Biden administration to evacuate Americans from that location. The State Department, however, says it does not have any current plans to do that. Fox News senior national correspondent Rich Edson with the details.
Another group of Marines arrived in Haiti this week to bolster security at the U.S. Embassy in Port-au-Prince. The Pentagon says they'll relieve forces already stationed there, adding the Marines were not deployed to help Americans escape.
We have installed additional security personnel there, but that's all they're doing is just securing the embassy.
The State Department says it's heard from hundreds of American citizens who've registered with the department to receive more information about the situation in Haiti. State says it cannot provide a firm number of how many Americans are there. State officials say they're not actively planning an evacuation and cited previous travel warnings.
For 4 years, we have been telling Americans, do not go to Haiti. Do not travel there. It's not safe to do so.
Florida launched its own portal to help stranded Floridians. Governor Ron DeSantis says he's deploying more law enforcement officers to the coast in preparation for a potential wave of migrants fleeing to the U.S.
The message is the last thing you should want to do is get on some boat and think you're going to come through from any of these islands to get to the state of Florida.
And Republicans on Capitol Hill maintain there's some risk to the U.S.
How does this administration expect that the gang violence and cartel violence in Haiti and Mexico, respectively, will not spill over into American borders with this open border?
The Biden administration says it plans to send an additional $25 million in humanitarian assistance to Haiti. In Washington, Rich Edson, Fox News.
Rich, thank you so much. And a lot of international news to get to here on Live Now from Fox. It is 9:08 on the East Coast and 6:08 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I thank you for being here with us on this Saturday, March 16th, 2024. The United Nations discussing a lot of international topics, including the war in Ukraine with Russia, as the presidential election is ongoing. I do want to play the comments from the United Nations after their meeting. They're only about 8 minutes in length, but they kind of summarize what happened during that meeting as the war is now in its third year.
You gotta tell me about. Tell you all about it.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of Ukraine, Albania, Andorra, Argentina, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Croatia, Cyprus, Czechia, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Liberia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Marshall Islands, Monaco, Montenegro, the Netherlands, New Zealand, North Macedonia, Norway, Palau, Poland, Portugal, Republic of Korea, Republic of Moldova, Romania, San Marino, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Uruguay, and the European Union. We condemn in the strongest terms the Russian Federation's illegitimate attempts to organize Russian presidential elections in temporarily occupied areas within the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. Holding elections in another UN member state's territory without its consent is in manifest disregard for the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Such elections have no validity under international law. We recall the United Nations General Assembly's resolution ESS 11/4, adopted at its emergency special session on October 12, 2022, that declared the Russian Federation's attempts to hold illegal so-called referendums in September 2022 in parts of Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia regions of Ukraine had no validity under international law and do not form the basis for any alteration of the status of those regions of Ukraine. An overwhelming 143 countries voted in support of the resolution and affirmed core principles under international law by condemning these so-called referendums. We also recall General Assembly Resolution 68/262 of March 27, 2014, which similarly underscored that Russia's referendums held on March 16, 2014 in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol had no validity and cannot form the basis for any alteration of the status of these regions. We reiterate the UN General Assembly's call to all states, international organizations, and the United Nations specialized agencies not to recognize any alteration by the Russian Federation of the status of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, as well as of any or all of the Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, or Zaporizhia regions of Ukraine, and to refrain from any action or dealing that might be interpreted as recognizing any such altered status. We demand the Russian Federation refrain from holding illegitimate elections in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. We reiterate the General Assembly's call for the Russian Federation to stop its war of aggression against Ukraine and to immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw all of its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. We reaffirm our unwavering support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, extending to its territorial waters. I thank you. I would like to thank all my colleagues who came to join me at delivering this statement, and I think they may leave because I would like then to make a statement of my own in my national capacity. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sarah, nice to see you. So I would like to draw your attention to today's press briefing in Geneva of the Independent Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine in the context of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation. The Commission is carrying out important work in accordance with its mandate. The advanced, unedited version of the report is available on the website of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The findings of the Commission are truly horrifying. Let me quote the Commission's conclusions. The evidence gathered has reinforced the Commission's previous findings that Russian authorities use torture in a widespread and systematic way. These issues directly relate to the Security Council meeting, which will begin in a few minutes, as it concerns egregious war crimes occurring daily against Ukrainians in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. And let me quote the latest report. Recently analyzed information is suggestive of the hierarchical nature of the services involved in the commission of torture, the knowledge of superiors and prevailing sentiment of impunity. Let me give you another quote. Victims' accounts disclose relentless, brutal treatment, inflicting severe pain and suffering for almost the entire duration of their detention, with blatant disregard for human dignity. leading to long-lasting physical, mental trauma. The Russian side continues to bury its head in the sand. As noted in the Commission's report, and I quote, "It regrets that its efforts to engage with the Russian Federation remain unsuccessful. The Commission has addressed 23 written requests for meetings, access, and information without receiving any answer from the Russian side. Therefore, we are not going to take lectures from Russian Federation, who have had ample opportunities to provide the Commission with access and information. And we call on Russia to start implementing the decisions of the UN main bodies, including the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council and the ICJ, to comply with international humanitarian law, which includes immediately cease this aggression and all acts of violence committed against civilians and prisoners of war in violation of applicable international human rights and international humanitarian law, and the use of torture and other forms of ill treatment against both civilians and prisoners of war. I thank you.
Ambassador Nadia Sitima from Al Jazeera English. What is your message to civilians who participate in elections in occupied Ukrainian territories, particularly those who feel pressured to participate?
The participation in the illegal attempts to organize so-called presidential elections of a foreign country in the territory of Ukraine is illegal, and whoever facilitates this organization of the elections is liable under Ukrainian criminal law. All right? Thank you very much.
Comments there from the United Nations as they took up topics related to the Ukraine-Russia war. All of this unfolding here as the presidential election is underway there in Russia. It is a 3-day election running from Friday through Sunday, but essentially at this point, it is assumed that Vladimir Putin will be elected to another 6-year term. We'll, of course, bring you the results regardless here on Live Now from Fox. The time now is 9:19 over on the East Coast, and it is 6:19 on the West Coast. We're going to head to a quick 2-minute commercial break, and we'll be right back with more live, raw, and unfiltered coverage. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Much more to come. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over Chicago at the Chicago River, where give it a few hours and you're going to watch as everything turns bright and green. We showed this to you live, raw, and unfiltered last year as it all played out. You essentially see some boats that move through and they drop that green dye, and all of a sudden that entire river turns green. It's pretty cool to watch, and we're going to bring it to you here as it does play out. That is scheduled for 11 a.m. Eastern Time. That is 10 a.m. Central Time. Also at 11, we're going to have the New York City Parade for St. Patrick's Day. There's also one over in Tampa, so we're getting pumped, we're getting excited because we're going to have all of that coverage today. Then over at noon, we are going to have the Wreaths Across America celebration that is going to be happening there, so we'll bring that to you. At noon Eastern Time, we also have the Atlanta St. Patrick's Day Parade, and there's some other ones in Kansas City. A lot to show you, so we are going to make sure to bring all of that to you here on Live Now. But you are once again taking a live look over at the Chicago River just a few hours ahead of that being dyed green. Alexis McAdams with Fox News breaks down more on the St. Patrick's Day celebrations and how folks are taking advantage and getting pumped.
Happy St. Patty's Day! St. Patrick's Day festivities are on the rise.
Last year, 2022 to 2023, we saw a 49% increase. So that's almost 50%. And we expect that number to keep rising.
But if you want to get in on the revelry, you better get up early. New research by Eventbrite shows people are planning to party just as hard, just starting earlier in the day. And Gen Z is driving that trend.
Gen Z young people have really embraced wanting to bring people together, get their communities out, but do it at a respectable time. So you're seeing a lot of events kick off at 1, but wrap at 8 p.m. So wrap early so people get enough time to get some shut-eye.
The push for daytime celebrations is also helped by landing on a Sunday, which is typically a work or school night. Roseli Ilano, Eventbrite's head of community, says those younger Americans are also looking for outdoor activities and unique experiences.
You can join a St. Patrick's Day bike ride or a green river dyeing experience to watch the river turn green. Step out of your comfort zone, explore new experiences. So whether that's an Irish-themed painting class, Irish dancing, traditional cooking class, lots of hobbies and passions to explore.
162 million Americans are planning to celebrate St. Patrick's Day this year, according to the National Retail Federation. And they'll not only be wearing green, but spending it. Expected to shell out a record $7.2 billion this year. That breaks down to about $44.40 a person. The bulk spent on food and beverages.
You know, brunches, bar crawls.
An overwhelming majority of Americans say they plan to participate in the luckiest holiday of the year by dressing in green. That's followed by making a special meal, going to a party, and attending a parade. In New York, I'm Alexis McAdams, Fox News.
And if you can't necessarily do all of that, don't worry, we have you covered, because the St. Patrick's Day Parade that is going to be in Dublin, Ireland, that is scheduled for tomorrow. Now, we're going to bring that to you live here on Live Now in full. It's at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time and is expected to run until 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Jeanne Francine will be in the hot seat, and we're not going to let her go to Dublin. That's too expensive. So instead, we're going to keep her here, and we're essentially just going to make her show you everything going on in Dublin. Don't forget, we do have all of the parades that are going to take place later on today. We're going to bring those to you. They pretty much start at 11 a.m. We've got the one in New York City. We're also going to see the Chicago River dyed green. A lot of live events, and you can watch them all here on Live Now from Fox. 9:25 over on the East Coast, 6:25 on the West Coast. We're going to head to a quick break, and we'll have more on your top stories and headlines on the other side. You're watching Live Now from Fox. We'll be right back. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox. 9:27 over on the East Coast, and it is 6:27 on the West Coast. Want to get back into the headlines now as Judge Scott McAfee issued his ruling Friday morning on the motions to disqualify Fulton County DA Fani Willis and her office from the Georgia election interference case against former President Trump and several others. Although McAfee stated that the defendants failed to prove that the district attorney acquired an actual conflict of interest in the case through her personal relationship and recurring travels with her lead prosecutor, McAfee asserted that the established record now highlights a significant appearance of impropriety that affects the current structure of the prosecution team, an appearance that must be addressed by the state through the selection of one of two options. Either Willis or Wade must go. And as we learned hours after that decision came down, Wade did submit his resignation and Willis accepted. I do want to talk more about all of this, so let's bring in Andrew Fleischman, a criminal defense and appellate attorney at Sessions and Fleischman there in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, people have been following kind of bits and pieces of this as it has played out here. Can you break down for me what led up to this point where we are right now?
Well, Fani Willis attempted to prosecute Donald Trump by using sort of a lengthy process, using a special grand jury, using sort of a convoluted indictment. And a lot of people were wondering why that was. And then when Ashley Merchant alleged that she had this relationship with Nathan Wade and that she had paid him all this money, people suspected that perhaps the reason for charging it this way and taking this long was because of that relationship. So she moved for disqualification on that basis. And Fani Willis admitted that she had been in a relationship with Nathan Wade, though she quibbled about what had happened. And that led the judge to order a hearing. That's where all the drama came from.
And it does seem like essentially the judge decided to present an ultimatum. Either Willis has to remove her entire office and herself or fire Wade. We know that Wade then entered in his resignation. Any of that surprising about the judge's ruling for you personally?
I thought it was actually very clever. So the judge doesn't have a way to directly disqualify Wade. That wasn't what the motion asked for. But Wade was obviously like the central problem in the case for many people. So he gave her an ultimatum instead. He said, I will disqualify if you don't remove Wade. And that was a clever way to avoid that problem. Also, because she only disqualified Wade instead of her whole office, it's not appealable by Fulton County. So in a lot of ways, just like a really clever gambit for the judge.
How does all of this impact the Georgia election interference case against former President Trump and several others? How is that impacted by this situation that we've watched play out now for essentially several weeks?
Well, I mean, the biggest impact is the potential that the defense could appeal here. They could request a certificate of immediate review. And if they get that and the Court of Appeals decides to take the case, that would add about 18 months of delay to the case, creating the possibility that there would be a state prosecution against a sitting president. That's the biggest issue with the case. Assuming that the certificate of immediate review is not granted or the Court of Appeals does not take the appeal, it should have very little impact on the case other than the bad optics we've seen.
What stood out to you about the hearing? As we watched it all play out, we heard testimony from Willis. We obviously heard a lot of other arguments as well. What stood out to you the most?
What really struck me is it was watching prosecutors, lifelong prosecutors, act like defense attorneys for the very first time and try to use the same things. I mean, listen, I've done gang cases, and sometimes a witness shows up and doesn't remember all the things they said down at the police station. And it was just so funny to see that happen on the other side and watch people arguing the opposite of what they normally would argue. On cell phone location data, it was so interesting to see the defense say, hey, this is a reliable guide to where people are. And Fulton County, which has secured dozens of convictions with cell phone data, saying it doesn't mean anything at all. It was like a bizarro world hearing. And as a defense attorney, it was incredibly entertaining and informative.
Tell me about the judge in this case and what we know about him.
Well, he's quite young. This was his first year on the bench, and he's just unbelievably good at the job for being so young. He's up for re-election right now. He's running. But he ran the courtroom in a way that moved things along. You look at that YSL trial also going on in Fulton that's taken 8 months just to get to jury selection. And you look at this judge shutting people down, moving things along, and making quick rulings when he wants to make a ruling. I thought for a judge of his age, it was exceptional performance.
Did this hearing and the ruling itself kind of slow down the case against Trump and his co-defendants overall when you look at the big picture?
Well, at a minimum, it ate up 2.5 months while we resolved these issues. But I'm not sure this case was ever going to get tried before the election anyway. I mean, the trial date that Fani Willis is asking for is August. A similar RICO trial is currently in its second year. So even if it gets tried in August, I don't think there was any way this case could be resolved before 2025.
Does this ruling set any sort of precedent?
It does, actually. Normally, trial court rulings don't, but because there's not much stuff on this issue, this is one of the first issues to explore, really, whether you use actual conflict or appearance of conflict and when those things show up. Courts have sort of used the phrases without defining them. And then he also talks about forensic misconduct, and he's like, oh, well, when is forensic misconduct, which is talking bad about a defendant outside of court, when is that bad enough? And he goes and he applies this ethics standard that's like, oh, well, when it's close enough to the trial to affect the jury. He actually just made a lot of sort of interesting new rulings that appellate courts are going to want to look at and decide if they want to adopt. It's not quite precedent, but it was probably persuasive, and I bet higher courts will want to adopt some of his reasoning.
All right, Andrew Fleischman there. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and kind of break down the latest. It's a fairly complicated and involved subject, so we do appreciate you being here with us. Is there anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
I just want to say that there's plenty of lawyers in Georgia who would love to take this case for $250 an hour. I hope Fani Willis extends an invitation to him.
Hopefully, yeah, she's watching. All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right, everybody, the time now 9:34 over on the East Coast, and it is 6:34 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here to bring you all of your top stories from across the country and the world. We've been taking a look at our live cameras over the past several hours here, and if we pop this one up right here, you can see this is the Chicago River, as we are now about an hour and a half away from that river being dyed green. It's one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. You just watch all the boats kind of move through super quick, and they drop that dye in there, and then you watch right before your eyes as it turns green. We're going to have that for you around 11 a.m. Eastern time. That is 10 a.m. Central time. That is also going to be followed by several different parades, including one in New York City. There's also one in Atlanta. They're all over the place, and we're going to have cameras at each and every one. Let's head to a quick 2-minute commercial break now at 9:35 on the East Coast and 6:35 on the West Coast. You're watching Live Now from Fox. We'll be right back. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox. Viewer discretion advised as you see those photos that are popping up on your screen there. I do want to get back into the headlines as we do head over to Chicago, Illinois. That is where there's quite a bit of controversy after a measles outbreak at a center that is essentially housing migrants. Mike Tobin with Fox News breaks down the latest.
At the turn of the century, measles was thought to be eradicated in the U.S. Now a couple of ambulances stand in front of a Chicago migrant shelter because the highly contagious disease came back in the chaos of an uncontrolled border. 12 new cases have been recorded in the Windy City, most in a warehouse-turned-migrant shelter in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood. 2 involve migrant students who have attended Chicago public schools. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson blames the Biden administration.
This is a really jacked up situation. The border, in and of itself, because of the failures of the federal government, has placed a tremendous amount of burden financially on the people of Chicago.
But one outspoken city alderman blames Johnson, citing the chaotic handling of the busloads of migrants arriving in Chicago.
This is just the beginning of what I think will be a long sojourn dealing with this, because the city refuses to deal with housing these migrants in a comprehensive way, leaving them in unsanitary, unhealthy, dirty living conditions in old warehouses and field houses.
Chicago public school students are required to be vaccinated against measles. New arrivals fall under an exemption for children in unstable housing. Of the 1,900 people living in the Pilsen shelter, most had vaccines or previous exposure. Teams from the CDC, the county and state health departments, as well as doctors from universities and hospitals are assisting with vaccinating about 900 migrants who now need to quarantine.
Measles is much more infectious and contagious than COVID-19. Measles can really be quite serious in a community with low vaccination rates.
Pregnant women and babies are not supposed to receive the measles vaccination, so the state of Illinois has moved close to 100 migrants to an unnamed hotel to quarantine. In Chicago, Mike Tobin, Fox News.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. You are taking a live look here over at the White House in D.C. as we do get to some of the political news here, and we do have a lot of topics to discuss. Chad Pergram with Fox News does break down a little bit more as Republicans on the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees are coming to the end of their impeachment inquiry against President Biden. What are they going to decide?
The White House says, quote, impeachment is over. A letter from White House counsel Ed Siskel to House Speaker Mike Johnson demands the House quit wasting time on this charade. But the Speaker says not so fast.
Mr. Speaker, the White House says impeachment is over. Do you agree? Do they get to call the shots on this?
They don't call the shots on it.
When is the investigation going to be complete and what's next?
We haven't addressed that yet. We will in due time.
The question is when. The House lacks the votes to actually impeach the president despite the GOP push.
Does it reach the high crimes, treason, high crimes misdemeanor standard? Everyone will have to make that evaluation.
Yet some conservatives insist on an impeachment vote, even if it fails.
I would love to be able to vote on the impeachment of Joe Biden.
Other Republicans are seeking an exit ramp, but they are on the clock.
If it doesn't happen soon, this place is out in August and October. The legislative calendar is getting very, very lean.
Despite the impeachment tension, the president and speaker sat next to each other at the Capitol for the annual St. Patrick's Day lunch.
No matter how much we debate, no matter how much we disagree, we always have been able to come together as friends of Ireland.
Was that a bit strange?
No, it was all pleasantries today. We didn't talk about policy at the table.
The House could make criminal referrals from its investigation, and there's a big hearing next week with business partners of Hunter Biden. But Hunter will skip. On Capitol Hill, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
Chad, thank you so much. Once again, taking a live look over at the White House. You heard there about the meeting between Biden and leaders of Ireland. This all happening ahead of tomorrow's St. Patrick's Day. Mr. Hansen here with Fox News filing a report with more of the details.
President Biden and other leaders hosted an Irish delegation ahead of St. Patrick's Day weekend. It's typically a lighthearted occasion.
My grandfather Finney used to say, may the hinge of our friendship never go rusty.
But this year, wars in Gaza and Ukraine were top of mind for the leaders.
We're standing together to support Ukraine in the face of Putin's onslaught. savagery.
Obviously, keen to talk about the situation in Gaza as well. You'll know my view that we need to have a ceasefire as soon as possible to get food and medicine in, to get hostages out, and we need to talk about how we can make that happen and move towards a two-state solution.
The meeting comes a day after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called for new elections in Israel.
He made a good speech, and I think he expressed a serious concern, shared not only by him but by many Americans.
Both President Biden and Ireland's Prime Minister called on Congress to pass funding for Israel and Ukraine. House Speaker Mike Johnson still pushing for U.S. border reform, but agreeing the U.S. and Ireland need to stick together.
Our hearts are heavy in spite of the fun fellowship, because stability is being threatened in Europe and in the Middle East, and our allies and friends such as Israel and Taiwan continue to fight for their very right to exist.
Both sides are hopeful peace talks between Israel and Hamas could lead to a ceasefire in Gaza, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved a military plan to move into the southern region of Rafah. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thank you so much for that report. Taking a live look here over at the Chicago River, where we are about an hour and 15 minutes away from seeing the river dyed green for St. Patrick's Day. It is pretty cool to watch, and we are going to bring it to you live, raw, and unfiltered here on Live Now from Fox. It all happens very quickly. You see the boats kind of move on through, drop that green dye, and everything starts to look very bright for St. Patrick's Day. Also want to remind you that coming up starting at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, we have countless parades to bring you. We're talking New York City, Atlanta, Tampa, all of them, and it kicks off at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The time now 9:44 on the East Coast and 6:44 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and I'm here to bring you all of your top stories from across the country and the world. Want to take a look at some of the live cameras that we do have. This right here is a beautiful shot of New York City. All fairly calm right now, but give it just another hour. You're going to see things pick up as that parade in New York City gets underway. Let's head to our final 2-minute commercial break of the hour. We'll have more live, raw, and unfiltered coverage on the other side. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Much more to come. Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over at our XRAD radar system where you can see things have really cleared out there in the Midwest. This all comes after severe storms that struck late Thursday into Friday. Sadly, we learned from authorities over in Ohio that at least 3 people have been confirmed dead. I do want to bring in Nicole Valdez with Fox Weather, joining us live from Logan County, Ohio, with a look at some of the damage left behind. Good morning, Nicole. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Josh, good morning to you. One of the most severe, really active severe weather days we've had so far this year. Tornadoes tearing through at least 4 states, including parts of western Ohio. Here in Indian Lake, Ohio, the devastation is, of course, very visible, and the emotions behind the amount of damage you see behind me, very real. You'll notice here where one mobile home once stood, and in its place, not much left. You see just a few chairs and tables and maybe some doors still left behind, as all of the walls and the roofs that once made this really a home were not only lifted off the ground but thrown several feet away. As you see here, the remnants of that mobile home shredded. I mean, this is what most of this area looks like. Orchard Island in particular, just off to my left here, is an area that's still closed by sheriff's deputies who are still in that recovery mode, what they're telling us today. So that active search and rescue that we saw ongoing yesterday has ended. They're now looking ahead and starting to assess a lot of this damage. We've watched them launch drones. We've seen several deputies' vehicles come in as they start to make progress in their investigation, trying to sort through all of this destruction. But I got to point out some of the evidence of how powerful a tornado we're talking about here. You'll notice in the distance, one home in particular here, that boat lifted out of the water, out of the marina, sent crashing down onto this mobile home. We're told there was actually someone hiding inside with their 2 dogs when this storm ripped through. A terrifying night, and now a lengthy recovery for so many. The good news here is not a lot of people were staying at this mobile home park when this storm came through. Typically, this is an area where a lot of people come to vacation during the warmer months. So really starting the beginning of April is when people start to come and stay here for a longer period of time. So the good news is that there were not a lot of people here when this storm moved through. Still, however, as we watch people come in, I've heard people talk about the amount of memories that they've made at this lake, at these homes, and now they're picking up the pieces of those memories of a place that they once loved to visit every year, and now, of course, just an absolute disaster. What we're looking to see today, Josh, is any updates from officials on that search, on the damage assessments, if this tornado has already been given a rating, and of course, if that death toll has risen. At this point, we still know of at least 3 dead here in Logan County.
All right, Nicole Valdez there with Fox Weather. It looks like there are some people that have been kind of walking around there surveying the damage and working on that cleanup efforts. Is that what you've kind of seen consistently over the past, I would say, several hours there?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, as the sun comes up here, volunteers continue to arrive, whether it's cleanup crews or whether people who had properties here to start sorting through really the pieces of what once was here, but also a lot of volunteers, people collecting water and food, trying to hand it out to those that are now cutting down trees and trying to repair things. So there was a lot of activity. It's in less than 2 days' time since this tornado came through. I think it really is a good sign here of the amount of support that's already shown up here.
All right, Nicole Valdez with Fox Weather live for us over in Logan County, Ohio. Thank you so much for being here as always.
Thanks, Josh.
And I do want to remind you to stream Fox Weather everywhere that you stream Live Now from Fox. You can simply go to any browser that you might use and type in Watch Fox Weather. Also, download the Fox Weather app to get alerts right to your phone when there is a watch or a warning in your area. All right, everybody, I do want to get to some of the other big stories that we are covering on this Saturday, March 16th. Take a look at your screen right here as 3 new bills aimed at cracking down on illegal immigration were signed into law Friday. Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, along with Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, and Attorney General Ashley Moody, as well as people who lost loved ones to crimes committed by illegal immigrants, held a press conference to sign those bills in Winter Haven. I do want to send you over to that press conference now for a look at some of those bills. Again, 3 of them that were signed into law by Governor DeSantis.
Morning. All right. Good morning. We're excited to be back in Polk County. I want to thank Sheriff Grady Judd for hosting us here. Grady, it's funny, people in Florida, like, they're proud of their sheriffs in many counties, but particularly here in Polk, and they have debates about, who's the best sheriff in Florida. And I would say, by extension, that means the best sheriff in America, right? And someone told me, like, it's not normal that people are so proud of their sheriffs, that they're always debating that, and that's what we see here in Florida. In fact, there's people in other states that debate who the best sheriff in Florida is. But Grady has really set the standard, and I'm proud to call him a friend. We're also here with Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez, our Attorney General Ashley Moody, Representative Kyan Michael from Northeast Florida, and then Nikki Jones, who's an Angel wife. We also have Representative Benny Jocks, I saw. Where's Benny at? Thank you for what you're doing. We also have Representative Plankin and Representative Bell. So we appreciate you all and all your great support. So we're here today, one, to build off a record of success with respect to combating illegal immigration. And if you think about it, if you go back 6 or 7 years in the state of Florida, we were not leading against illegal immigration at all. In fact, we were one of the weaker states with respect to illegal immigration. Since we've come in, we've done things like ban sanctuary cities throughout the state of Florida. Those were legal in this state prior to me taking office. We've also worked to enact harsh penalties for people that are bringing fentanyl into our community. 99% of the time, it's coming across the border. We make sure in Florida not to do things like sanctuary jurisdictions do, such as issuing driver's licenses to illegal aliens. That is not allowed in the state of Florida. We also make sure that you're eligible to work to be here with using things like E-Verify. That's a magnet that brings in a lot of illegal immigration if you allow an illegal workforce. So the legislature passed last year, and I signed E-Verify legislation. We also understood that, yes, Florida does not allow driver's license, but you had some local jurisdictions that were trying to issue, quote, picture IDs or community IDs to people here illegally. NGOs, non-government organizations, were trying to do that. So we passed legislation that I signed that said, no, you're not allowed to issue any type of ID to illegal aliens, including our local governments and our non-governmental organizations. And so the package that we did last year with the help of Kyan and Blaise Ngolia and many other people in the House and Senate, even the New York Times admitted was the strongest immigration legislation in the entire country. So we're proud of that. We're proud that we have really stepped up to empower people like Grady Judd to keep his community safe here in Polk County. If you look at statistics, I think Polk County has the biggest numerical increase in population of any county in Florida. Certainly one of them. I grew up, it's west of here, but like anyone that grew up in Central Florida, Polk was viewed as very rural even 30 years ago. Now it's just booming, but part of the reason that's the case is because people know if you move to Florida, you're going to be treated well, but if you move to Polk, they're serious about law and order, and people want to be safe. And so that's really something that's been great. So we're proud of that, but we don't like to just sit and rest on our laurels. So I'm here today to be able to sign 3 great pieces of legislation, make some comments on another Senate memorial that was passed, and then give an update on what we're doing to prevent illegal vessels from coming and landing to Florida from places like Haiti. First, HB 1589. what you see is, yes, we don't give driver's license to illegal aliens, which you shouldn't. We don't recognize driver's license from other states that have been issued to illegal aliens, so that's smart. But you still have people that come and drive without a license. One of the biggest deterrents we can do for illegal immigration is to make sure people that are doing that are facing serious consequences. And so that's what that bill does. It increases the maximum sentence for people who are driving illegally without a license, and even provides mandatory sentences for repeat offenders. This is going to be a deterrent for illegal immigration into the state of Florida. You come here, you're not getting a license. We're not recognizing your California license that you may have gotten in a sanctuary state. You're going to come here, and then if you're driving and you're endangering people, and Cayenne will talk about that, and other people, and this is not academic. I mean, this is something that has shattered the lives of families with these folks doing what they're doing. So this is important. So I'm happy to be able to sign that. The other thing, the second bill is Senate Bill 1036, enhances penalties for a crime committed by an individual who returns to the country illegally after deportation. And what you find in some of these really significant incidents where people are getting raped or murdered is it's not only an illegal alien, but it's somebody that had already been deported from this country and then comes back to commit crimes again. So in the state of Florida, if you have been deported and you come to this state and enter our state and you're here illegally and you commit crimes, we are throwing the book at you. And you are going to regret coming to the state of Florida. So I'm happy to sign that into law. And then the other one is House Bill 1451. So I mentioned we don't allow local governments or non-government organizations to issue any type of identification to people that are in our country illegally. But we also want to make sure that they can't get a group in California to just issue them, and then our local governments are honoring that. So what this legislation does is it says no jurisdiction, state or local, can recognize those types of rogue identifications that are issued to illegal aliens. And so all in all, those are three very positive pieces of legislation. I'm going to sign those into law in a second after we hear from some of our speakers. I also just want to applaud the legislature for Senate Memorial 1020. So these memorials are calling on Congress to do certain things, are calling on the federal government. So they have called on the federal government to designate the Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And I think that that would go a long way. It's something that I've supported for a long time. And they are foreign terrorist organizations because they are importing product into this country that is killing our people by the tens of thousands each and every year. Finally, give an update on I recently made an announcement augmenting our resources in southern Florida with respect to warding off a potential influx of vessels carrying illegal immigrants from places like Haiti. This is not a new operation for us. We've been assisting the Coast Guard. Obviously, the Coast Guard is the primary vehicle to protect the shorelines of the United States. We have supplemented that throughout the years. January of 2023, I did an executive order declaring it to be a state of emergency, and we surged vessels to be able to assist the Coast Guard. And so since January of 2023 until this week, March of 2024, our efforts have led to the interdiction of 670 vessels carrying over 13,500 illegal aliens. And so those are people that were stopped from being able to make it to Florida. Those aliens get turned over to the Coast Guard, and then by law, they have to repatriate them to their home country. So we have a lot more ability to stop on the sea. If the Coast Guard decides to dump in our state, it makes it much more difficult for us because our tools aren't as good. So this has been a very successful operation. And so what we decided to do, given the situation that's happening in Haiti, some brutal reports that are happening, we want to make sure that we're protecting Floridians. And so we have authorized additional officers with the relevant agencies, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Florida Fish and Wildlife. We've also augmented the National Guard, another 48 guardsmen, up to 133 soldiers from the Florida State Guard, and 30 additional officers from Florida Highway Patrol, 4 additional helicopters through the National Guard. So this is a significant augmentation. And I think the message is the last thing you should want to do is get on some boat and think you're going to come through from any of these islands to get to the state of Florida. The most likely scenario is you will be stopped and you will be returned to your country of origin. So it's a hazardous journey. It's not worth doing, and we have the resources that are going to continue to keep the people of Florida safe. Just recently, within the last couple of weeks, and this will be made public later today, our Florida Fish and Wildlife officers interdicted a vessel that had 25 illegal immigrants, potential illegal immigrants from Haiti, in their boat, in their vessel. They had firearms, they had drugs, they had night vision gear, and were boating very recklessly, which would potentially endanger other folks. So that vessel was interdicted near the Sebastian Inlet. And those illegal aliens were turned over to the Coast Guard for deportation. So our folks have been doing this before we augmented this, and they're going to continue to do it. And we've got an incredible amount of resources that are now on display to be able to prevent. Now, what's different today than maybe in the past? Well, part of it is we have more resources that the state has been willing to put up. And this is not really our responsibility. This is the federal government's responsibility. Coast Guard does, by and large, a good job, but they're undermanned. They're under-resourced. So we're filling those gaps. I think one difference now is, and we see this with our folks that we have at the border, you have people coming across the southern border from all over the world. Haitians can get to the United States easier by flying to Mexico and walking across the border. And so I would anticipate if flights resume, that will likely be where a lot of those folks who are trying to flee, if they want to come to the United States, they're probably going to go to Mexico and then come in through the border, knowing that Biden will just let everybody in. Also, I think it's important to point out, we focus on the border. We're obviously doing things to interdict these illegal vessels, which I think is really important. But Biden is also flouting the law by creating an illegal parole program where he flies in people from foreign countries against the law and puts them into our community. So, for example, you just had an instance where one of the people Biden flew in from Haiti is now charged with sexually assaulting a 15-year-old with disabilities in Massachusetts. And you think to yourself, how is that protecting our people? You're putting our own people at risk through violating the law, a policy that's not authorized under the law. It's a violation of parole, how that's used, and he's doing that, and it's causing a lot of problems. So yes, the border has been a huge issue. There's a lot of different ways in which this administration is flouting the law. So in Florida, we're going to continue to do everything we can to protect folks and to make sure that this state continues to be a great state to live in. Look, it's important to get the policy right. And we've got our policy so much better today than it was 6 or 7 years ago in the state of Florida with respect to illegal immigration. But you also need to have people that are going to be implementing that policy on the ground. And you have that here in Polk County under Sheriff Grady Judd. You have it across Florida with so many great sheriff's departments, police departments, and then, of course, our state agencies. All these people that have been out there fortifying our coastline, Fish and Wildlife, our National Guard, our State Guard, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Florida Highway Patrol. These are folks that have been doing a lot. These are the same people that respond to Hurricane Idalia and the year before Hurricane Ian. A lot of the same agencies are down at the southern border helping Texas. And, of course, they have a lot of work they do on a daily basis. And so we really appreciate what people are doing who are wearing the uniform to help to keep our community safe. So I think these bills will go a long way to helping make their job easier and make them even more effective. And I look forward to signing them into law momentarily. But before I do that, we're going to hear from some of our speakers. So first, we're going to hear from our Lieutenant Governor, Jeanette Nunez.
Well, good morning, and it's great to be here in Polk County, and I want to thank Governor DeSantis for signing these bills into law in just a few minutes, but more importantly for his leadership on this issue of illegal immigration in particular. He's been a steadfast champion, and Floridians are better off because of him. And of course, I won't wait. Yes. And of course, I won't wade into the debate of who is our best sheriff in the state of Florida. I will let the public decide that. But I do want to thank Sheriff Grady Judd for all the work he and his deputies do each and every day, particularly on the issue of combating human trafficking. I know you've done so much on that issue, and it's important to the governor and myself, and so we thank you. And what you know is that the governor has been incredibly supportive of our men and women in law enforcement, and one of the areas that I want to thank him as well publicly is creating a criminal interdiction unit and tasking them with Operation Safe Highways. I had the opportunity to ride along with them and see the work that they're doing when they are traversing our state interstates, our highways, our roadways to keep people safe, in particular on this issue of illegal aliens that are perhaps using our roadways to conduct illegal and illicit activities. And so I think we all agree that what is happening in this country is just incomprehensible. I don't know at what point it became acceptable to basically snub the rule of law and be derelict in your duties to protect Americans, in this case here in the state of Florida. And so what I'll tell you is that Governor DeSantis does not stand by. He does not cross his arms and put his hands up in the air. He takes action. And by doing that, he's protecting Floridians. He's protecting our country. And so he leads not only by word, but by deed. And the legislation he's signing today is just another example of how he's continuing to focus on this issue. And as he mentioned, he's done so much already, and one of the areas that I want to applaud him is impaneling a statewide grand jury that's been investigating criminal networks and making sure that we're addressing this issue from the perspective of a criminal grand jury and the work that they're doing. What I'll say is we've received 6 presentments thus far, and these interim reports shed more and more light on the utter failures of the Biden administration to protect the border and to keep people safe. And what we've learned really is sobering, and it is the cause of much outrage, especially for those of us that care about law and order. And in the words of the grand jury themselves, Floridians are almost dangerously naive and unaware of the magnitude and the malevolence of the illegal immigration industry. And they aptly point out, as the governor talked about cartels, how cartels are exploiting our border. They're using people and children as commodities. They're bringing into this country dangerous criminals, dangerous weapons, and dangerous drugs. So much so, they've seized enough fentanyl to kill upwards of 1 billion people. They also have NGOs that are receiving taxpayer dollars that are facilitating and assisting with illegal immigration, turning a blind eye to the dangerous track and to all the dangers that come into this country. They've also have the federal government bureaucracy is complicit, and they are rushing to release children to unvetted and unrelated sponsors. And since Biden came into office, we've seen over 10 million people cross our border, more population than 40 states in this country. So all of these statistics are alarming, they're shocking, they're sobering, and it really is shameful to see that illegal immigration, the industrial complex, because it is an industrial complex, it is alive and well, and it's a booming business. In Miami-Dade County, what we've seen is the immigration courts are facing the largest backlog of any court in this country, with 10% of the overall immigration cases. Further proof that Florida is indeed disproportionately affected by illegal immigration. And what's worse is that the overwhelming majority of those cases that are being addressed by the court, more than 90% of them lose their asylum claim. So again, the Biden administration is single-handedly responsible for this crisis, and we need to put an end to it. So that's why why I'm so proud to stand alongside a governor that stops at nothing to protect Floridians. He's taken action, so much so that what you've seen is Florida is leading the way. Florida is a trailblazer on so many issues, but this issue in particular, and the support that we've offered those border states, but obviously with a focus on Floridians. So I want to thank the governor for prioritizing law and order every step of the way, and for his leadership in keeping Floridians safe. Thank you all very much.
Okay. Attorney General.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today to celebrate this milestone in Florida. Certainly, this is a significant achievement by our legislature. Thank you for everyone here today who is shining a light on the challenges we face in this country. As you heard from the Lieutenant Governor, who's been a great Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much, and for highlighting the work of our statewide prosecutors and the Florida grand jury, who upon the direction and insistence of Governor DeSantis launched an investigation as to what was happening with transnational criminal organizations and how it was affecting Florida, those children that were being smuggled across the border, what we were seeing in terms of illegal immigration and the disastrous consequences of this president. And what we found is that, you heard the numbers, 10 million people, 7 million of which we know came across the border because they were said welcome, processed right in, and then millions more that we never had contact with, smashing historical records. And what we know is that criminals have come into the country as a result of that breakdown in border security, which has been intentional, and it has been since day one, since President Biden has been in office. This governor recognized that this was going to be a real problem for the security and safety of our communities. We immediately started litigating against this administration, especially in the first month when our sheriffs told us that this administration had backtracked on all former policies and said, we're not going to deport those here illegally, committing serious crimes, committing felonies. I know everybody used to do that, but not under the Biden administration. That left our sheriffs and our police chiefs and our state officers on the front lines combating people here, committing crimes that should never have been here. The breakdown of the border, throwing open the gates, has allowed those criminals to infiltrate our country. Do not take my word for it as Attorney General. Take the grand jury's word for it. Take Director Wray's testimony this week in which he said, we know, there is no doubt, criminals have come into our country, are coming into our country, criminals related to transnational criminal organizations. In fact, even those organizations that have ties to ISIS. That was this week. This week, we also heard from a sheriff in South Florida who said we had a girl raped by 3 people here illegally. 1 came over at the beginning of this month, right across our border. And that is because the wide open border. Now, you heard the governor say it's not just the wide open border that's putting our community members at risk. It's also the programs that Biden has created. Never been done before, but now if you're in another country, he will bring you straight here. They've brought hundreds of thousands of people directly into our country and paroled them into the U.S. And as Governor DeSantis just said, we're already learning about those who are committing crimes. There is no doubt our country is left safe. Not a day goes by that you don't see someone that has been harmed by someone here illegally that should not be here, was not vetted when they came across, or they just escaped all detection because this is a historical surge. In fact, there are even mass release quotas by this administration. How would our personnel ever be able to keep up with that? And these programs that have been created, which are totally unlawful, we have fought every step of the way. We have been in court litigating to push back on these illegal programs. With the support of Governor DeSantis, he's been fighting ever since, not just about not deporting those here illegally committing crimes, but to stop these unlawful programs. We can't even deal with the ones coming across the border. Why are we bringing more unvetted into the U.S.? It is untenable. This governor has done more than any other governor in this country to lead efforts like the bills that we assigned today. I would like to thank Bernie Jock, Cayenne Michael, Melanie Bell, Rachel Plakin, the legislative leadership for these bills has just been remarkable. They fought for these. They were on the floor for hours fighting for these bills, and particularly the one that's going to enhance the penalties from those that re-enter after being deported that are committing crimes against our citizens. They will also enhance penalties for those committing crimes here that are tied to transnational organizations. Our prosecutors worked with the statewide grand jury, and that was a direct recommendation from the statewide grand jury to our legislative leaders to say, please strengthen our laws, to make it harder for those here who are coming with a criminal intent to do harm for Floridians. This will make an enormous difference. And what I want everyone here to know is that state leaders shouldn't have to be passing laws or fighting in court against our president to keep our communities safe. This is remarkable. This has never happened. We have a president who does not care what is happening or the affect on Americans or Floridians in terms of their family and community safety. And it's not just that he doesn't care. He is actively fighting states that are trying to do their work for them. He has battled Texas to take down the barriers they have put up. He has battled Florida when we've asked them, don't release criminals back into our communities. He has battled Florida when we said, please stop the mass releases so that we can make sure that our country is safe. Today, he is battling us in court. We just battled him this week and got a negative adverse decision, and we're going to have to appeal our president who fights us as this news comes across the wire. And so not as Attorney General, not as someone who has worked with this great governor or our sheriffs across the state that has seen the devastation to families and communities as a result of these policy decisions, as a mother, as a wife of a law enforcement officer, I plead directly to our president. And I don't mean to make light of this, but put down whatever you are doing. This is not a partisan issue. These are people that are coming together in communities that have lost loved ones, that are feeling the dangerous effects directly a result of your decisions as to the security of this country. Pay attention, reverse course, secure this border, listen to the director of the FBI, listen to the families that have lost loved ones, listen to the Floridians who want safe communities and have to rely on a state government to defend borders when that is the responsibility of the President of the United States. Put down the ice cream cone, pay attention, and let's save lives. Thank you, Governor DeSantis.
Grady always has some visual aids, so I'm just getting a little bit of a sneak preview of being able to see what he's got cooking. So.
Thank you, Governor. You know, the governor would be disappointed in me if I didn't have these cards. And you never want your governor disappointed in you. It is truly my honor for you to be here today, Governor. And when you look at these men and women who stand with us, they are on the front lines. They're the ones keeping the people of Polk County, and there's ones just like them across the state and nation trying their dead level best to keep people safe. But we have to follow the law. And we wouldn't have the laws to do what we do without great governors such as you. And you are the man who's made such a positive difference. And you sent the message loud and clear. We're going to keep Polk County safe. We're going to keep Florida safe. We want the world to be safe, and especially the United States. But listen, I'm going to bring this down. You've heard the governor and our attorney general, who I think the absolute world of. Go ahead and leave that down there. That's right. That thing driving me crazy. And beside that, I got my star up here now. Okay. So it's important. I'm going to get this right down to the lowest common denominator. You heard the governor eloquently say what he's doing to protect Florida, and he's doing all that he can to protect us. But look, for those of you in Congress and the executive branch, this is a secure border. This is an unsecure border. Everybody knows the difference, except for the executives and the Congress, who are absolutely, totally tone deaf. Now, For those of you who are slow learners, this is a secure border. This is another picture of an insecure, unsecure border, both. Folks, they're coming here not just to find a better way of life like many of our forefathers did, but they're coming here to kill our people while they make enormous profits. And one example is fentanyl. Look at this. 377,000 people have died in this country since 2018 from fentanyl overdose deaths alone. And where did they come from? The fentanyl's coming from Mexico. We worked a large operation here. We found that the fentanyl had gone to Compton, was in a house in Compton. It came directly from Mexico to Compton. We bought 2 kilos of fentanyl undercover. We flew out there. Law enforcement there wouldn't help us enter the house. They don't knock on doors. The criminals are winning in California. The criminals are winning in New York. Governor DeSantis says the criminals are not going to win in Florida.
All right, so you're taking a listen to Polk County Grady Judd as he is talking about combating illegal immigration and the dangers, he says, that comes with illegal immigration, such as drugs and crime. We are going to step away for a 2-minute break here on Live Now from Fox. Time right now is 10:22 Eastern, 7:22 Pacific. I'm Stephanie Quinnew, and thank you so much for spending your Saturday with us. We appreciate it. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. We do have a programming note to let you know about. St. Patrick's Day, of course, is this Sunday. And here on Live Now from Fox, we have special extended coverage all the way from Dublin, Ireland. Our host, Janae Francine, she is going to be airing and hosting the St. Patrick's Day Parade live as it happens in Dublin, Ireland. That is tomorrow, Sunday, starting at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you want to get into this spirit, that is a great way to do so. And I also want to show you these live looks right here, of course, as cities across the United States prepare for their St. Patrick's Day festivities this weekend. A lot happening already today. On the left-hand side of your screen, that is a live look of the Chicago River in Chicago, Illinois. At 11 a.m. Eastern, they are going to be dyeing their river green. Of course, this is an annual tradition ahead of their St. Patrick's Day parade, and it always is so fun to see the river becoming this incredible emerald jewel-toned green. It is absolutely beautiful. On the right-hand side of your screen, on the upper right-hand side, that is a live look from New York City as they get ready for their St. Patrick's Day parade, also at 11 a.m. Eastern. On the lower right-hand side of your screen, that is a look at Tampa, Florida. They're going to be holding their parade at 5 p.m. Eastern, and we have so many live events and so many cameras, we couldn't possibly show you all of them. But in addition to this, Atlanta is going to be holding their parade at noon, Minneapolis at 1 p.m. Eastern, San Francisco at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, Dallas at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we are lucky here at Live Now from Fox, where we have access to cameras from all around the United States as well as all around the world. And of course, as these parades, as these river dyes happen, we will bring you those live here on Live Now from Fox. But speaking of St. Patrick's Day, we want to actually head over to Ireland, and we welcome in live Alice Manzer, who is the CEO of Tourism Ireland. Thank you so much for joining us, Alice. We appreciate it.
Well, happy St. Patrick's Week, and thank you for having me, Stephanie.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you, because as we were just showing, cities all across the United States are preparing for St. Patrick's Day here in America. I would imagine that the celebrations are going to be just as spectacular, if not more so, in Ireland, but there is maybe a different significance, a historical significance for folks in Ireland. So what is the significance of St. Patrick's Day in Ireland?
Well, we're going to need to go back in time by 1,500 years because it's really a celebration of our patron saint of Ireland, St. Patrick. And he is said to have died on March the 17th in 461. And St. Patrick came from Roman Britain. He was taken in captivity as a slave to Ireland, where he tended to sheep on Slemish Mountain in Northern Ireland. He escaped and then chose to come back to spread Christianity across the island. And he's remembered for many pieces of myth, like banishing snakes from Ireland and the shamrock, which he used to explain the Holy Trinity. But honestly, the significance of St. Patrick's Day is even broader because really in modern times, it's also a day to celebrate connections all around the world and that sense of Irishness. We've got 70 million people around the world, 32 million in the US who claim Irish heritage. And it's a wonderful time, I think, for everybody from every background to feel just a little bit Irish for the day.
Absolutely. I myself am wearing green in preparation for tomorrow, and it truly is just such a wonderful occasion to come together, put aside the differences, and really celebrate such a historically significant and rich culture, and hopefully learn a little bit more about Ireland and the Irish heritage. What can we expect for tomorrow?
Oh, it is going to be a spectacle, Stephanie, and it's one, you should really experience on home ground on the island of Ireland once in a lifetime. We can expect festivals in full swing right across the island, and in Dublin alone, we're going to have 4,000 performers on the streets. They'll be performing to 500,000 people, celebrating Irish music, mythology, storytelling, dance, and so it's a very joyful occasion that winds its way through city streets. And that's the main parade in Dublin. But of course, there will be celebrations happening island-wide. And I remember as a child, I would always have gone with my family on the train into the centre of Dublin. I remember being lifted up to see the action. But then when I was older as a college student, I travelled around a little bit. And most towns and villages will have their own sort of homespun celebrations going on. And that's the magic of St. Patrick's Day, is everybody celebrating in their own way and coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Boston, and of course, Boston, Massachusetts has a very vibrant Irish population. Loved St. Patrick's Day there, but I can't even imagine being in Dublin, Ireland, and being surrounded with so many people just celebrating. I wish I could be there tomorrow. Thankfully, here on Live Now from Fox, we're going to be able to air that parade for those who are not as fortunate to be able to go overseas and join. So curious for you, because here in America, we have our own traditions on St. Patrick's Day. Do the Irish have any unique ways of celebrating tomorrow?
Well, it's definitely about family and friends and connection, and the parade always plays a really big part. We tend to wear green, and love seeing you in green today, Stephanie, so thank you for that. And then food-wise, you know, when I was a child, I would maybe have had Colcannon with my family, but there's a real renaissance in the Irish food scene. If you picture our landscape for a moment of rolling green hills and lashing wild Atlantic waves, and now picture the food that comes from that landscape. We've got incredible seafood and fruit and vegetables. And so there are so many options now as people come together for a meal from the land and get to celebrate with all the joy of St. Patrick's Day.
And is there a particular Irish saying that one shares with one another or exchanges with one another on St. Patrick's Day?
Well, certainly Happy St. Patrick's Day, or in the Irish language, that would be Lo Éile Fórig Hunadich. And this year's festival theme actually is Spréach, to give you another piece of Gaelic or Irish. Spréach means spark, and it's that lifeblood of inspiration, that spark in the eyes, that spark of creativity. So we hope everybody feels a little spark of Irishness on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, say that one more time for me, Alice.
Spréach.
Spréach.
Yeah. Oh, you got it.
Oh, I've learned I think one of my first Irish words or Gaelic words. Wow, you've taught me something. So thank you so much for that. Anything else that you would like to let folks here know about ahead of tomorrow's incredible festivities and celebrations and the main parade in Dublin?
Well, the biggest thing to say is have fun. And beyond that, you know, it's a lovely time also for exploring the island of Ireland. Springtime is such a beautiful time when all the greenery and scenery comes into bloom. So what we find when people do come to the parade is that they tend to stay for on average about 8 days and explore the scenery, whether it's the Wild Atlantic Way, which you can see in my backdrop here, or whether it's heading up to Northern Ireland to retrace St. Patrick's steps around Slemish Mountain and Downpatrick, where he's buried, or Ireland's ancient East, where we've got antiquities that go back even further than the pyramids, going back 5,000 years or so. So we hope to be able to say Céad Míle Fáilte, which means 100,000 welcomes, to you, Stephanie, and many of your viewers in years to come, so we can celebrate the parade and also show you around.
No, absolutely. And taking a look at that backdrop, and I know it's just a backdrop, but even thinking about seeing it in real life, when we're talking about history, and you were talking about some of these are even older than the Egyptian pyramids. I mean, it's just, you have to be there to really get that sense. And I'm sure once you are there, you can feel the history, you can feel the ancestors, you can feel all of that just surrounding you. So how beautiful. And Alice, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on this Saturday, the day ahead of St. Patrick's Day. No doubt you are very busy as you prepare for tomorrow, so we appreciate you taking the time.
Thrilled to. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Yes, and same with you. Thank you, Alice. And we are going to take a break here on Live Now from Fox. Time right now is 10:34 Eastern, 7:34 Pacific. We'll be right back in 10 minutes. 2 minutes, I should say. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, and you're taking a live look at the Chicago River right there. As you can see, crowds of people starting to gather. This is what's happening at 11 a.m. Eastern. So in just about 20 minutes or so, boats are actually going to be traveling down this river, dumping eco-friendly green dye. And this is to dye the river a beautiful emerald green to celebrate the St. Patrick's Day. And I want to show you this live look right here. This is another live look from Chicago. You can see this is an aerial shot from a helicopter as they are zooming in, and we can see one of those little boats. We don't know if that boat is going to be dumping the dye, but imagine. And so we're going to bring that to you live here on Live Now from Fox. But it's just such a fun event, such a fun tradition. If you've never seen it, if you've never been to Chicago, it truly is a sight to see. So we're really happy that we can share that with you here on Live Now from Fox. And already early in the morning over in Chicago, lots of folks bundle up because it's fairly chilly there. As you can see, they do not want to miss out on any sort of event there. So again, programming note, stick with us because we are going to be airing that live here on Live Now from Fox as soon as that gets underway. And again, that is scheduled for 11 a.m. I also want to show you another shot, and this is from Tampa right here because, you know, further south where it is much warmer, they're also going to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day today as well. In fact, at 11 a.m., they're going to be holding their River O Green Fest. That's returning to downtown Tampa. That starts at 11 a.m. Eastern, but their parade is at 5 p.m. Eastern. So again, we are going to be sharing throughout the day all of these live St. Patrick's Day festivities as they get underway. And ahead of St. Patrick's Day, President Biden and Ireland's Prime Minister, they attended the annual Friends of Ireland luncheon in Washington, D.C. That was yesterday, so I do want to play out some of the remarks that happened right now. And again, you can see this is a look right here at the podium. You can see the American flag right there. You can also see the Irish flag. House Speaker Mike Johnson is going to be taking to the podium any minute. And actually, he is on the left-hand side of your screen. He's going to be making those opening remarks before President Biden. And right there seated, that is actually Ireland's Prime Minister right there. You can see a very jovial crowd. But again, we are going to be playing part of these comments. You can see President Biden right there, also seated next to the Irish Prime Minister. House Speaker Johnson is taking a walk up to the podium as he delivers his welcoming remarks. Again, this is at the annual Friends of Ireland luncheon. Let's listen in.
All right, let me, if I could have your attention. Well, thank you all. I know it's been a great time of fellowship and enjoyment. It's been very loud in here. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Not great acoustics, but great fellowship. This lunch is a special event, as we noted earlier, because it's a time when we come together here in Washington each year. And what's unique about it, what's important, I think, is that we look past our political differences for this moment in time, and we remember the importance of peacemaking. And we celebrate the important friendship between our two countries, the United States and Ireland. And today we all welcome continued efforts to promote and preserve the Good Friday Agreement and promises of a bright future for all the friends of Ireland. And certainly at this time, in many ways our hearts are heavy in spite of the fun fellowship, because stability is being threatened in Europe and in the Middle East, and our allies and friends such as Israel and Taiwan continue to fight for their very right to exist. And I know everyone in this room is committed to the same things, that we know that we all must stand for national sovereignty and work for peace. And this is an important time for all of us to encourage a productive dialogue and mutual respect, and even when we may disagree on matters of politics and policy, which is inevitable, we should all appreciate traditions like this, an occasion for thoughtful discourse where we can thoughtfully move beyond what Yeats called polite but meaningless words. When we do that, it restores trust among the people and it renews faith in our institutions. And I think all of us know that we need that desperately right now. So today I'm happy that we're able to showcase the Irish spirit of charity and humor and friendship that flows through your children and through my children and all the children and all of the friends of Ireland. So I have the distinct pleasure now of introducing our Commander-in-Chief and someone who is known everywhere as America's most famous Irishman, President Joe Biden.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I was telling the Speaker at dinner when a good friend of mine, and many of you, a former senator from Oregon, Senator Smith, came to me when I was Vice President and said, you know, I've checked it out. You're able to accept this gift. I said, what's the gift? He said, well, the single most significant compilation of historical records and family records are held by the Mormon Church. And he said, we want to do a background for you. We want to check your genealogy for you. And they ended up showing up 5 months later with 6 volumes. And one of them pointed out that on the one side of the family, the ones that came from County Louth, they started off in New Orleans. And I've warned them, it could have stayed. I would have been in a bit of trouble. Folks, look, Mr. Speaker, and I want you to know that diplomat Shane Leslie once wrote, every St. Patrick's Day, every Irishman goes out to find another Irishman to make a speech to. So thank you for allowing me to find you. Mom, it's okay. Look, you know, I'm glad I found all of you because no matter how much we debate, no matter how much we disagree, we always have been able to come together as friends of Ireland. And, you know, the friendship goes back centuries, but today is an important period, an important milestone. Nearly 100 years of diplomatic relations, Taoiseach, and every 100 years of Ireland and the United States. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for hosting us today. It's a tradition I've always enjoyed. And Taoiseach, thank you for joining us again. You know, I also like to extend the 100,000 welcomes to all the leaders who are involved in the Ireland and Northern Ireland agreement that they've now put it together. And I think I just wonder whether my mother would have ever thought that would happen. But it's happened, and it's great. You know, it's great to come together once again. To all Irish Americans, Democrats and Republican members here, I'm glad to be united on this issue, and we begin the next century of a real partnership. It's been a partnership that's really increasing now. And finally, to all they wish they're Irish, I'm glad you're here too. My grandfather used to say that being Irish is enough. At any rate, I won't go into that. But I stand here as a proud descendant of the Finnegans and the Blewitts, the Finnegans from County Mayo, which I just was there not long ago, and the Finnegans from County Louth. And this pride is part of my soul. I'm sure that all of you who are Irish and ancestors feel the same way. In fact, as many of you know, when I served in Capitol Hill, my colleagues used to kid me because I was quoting Irish poets. They thought I quoted Irish poets forever because I was Irish. I don't do it for that reason, because they're the best poets in the world. That's why I quote them. Stenny, it's true. And, you know, I really, today, there's one poem in particular that comes to mind. It was written by my great-grandfather, Edward Francis Blewett, who was only the second Catholic elected to the state senate in the state of Pennsylvania back in 1906. And he wrote a book of poems, 100 poems, and about his, he referred to as his Ireland. One he called The Worker, and here's what he said. No barrier is too thick or strong to stay the onward march each day. A goal they seek, a goal they find. Hardship for them is but real play.
And that is President Joe Biden as he was reciting a poem during the annual Friends of Ireland luncheon. This is yesterday as he attended with Ireland's Prime Minister. We are continuing to cover a lot of St. Patrick's Day events here at Live Now from Fox. And at 11 a.m. Eastern, we are going to be bringing you live the Chicago River dyeing, of course, as they dye their river emerald green to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. We are going to step away for a 2-minute break here on Live Now from Fox. We'll be right back. We do have some breaking news to let you know about here on Live Now from Fox. A shelter-in-place order has now been issued for Fall Township, Pennsylvania. And this is a tweet or an X comment made by Middletown Township Police Department. There has been confirmed shootings in Falls Township. It reads, there are several gunshot victims, and it is unknown at this time if they are targeted or random. MTPD is monitoring our traffic and borders, and it does not seem that the shooter has entered our township limits. However, this is a fluid situation, and we are asking the community to take some precautions. Do not travel to Falls Township until further notice. And we have been following this with our Fox 29 team. And again, a shelter-in-place order has been issued because of police activity right now. Officials urging residents to stay inside their homes, locking all windows and doors. And of course, this is a breaking news story. Police did not immediately release any details about what prompted that order. But again, according to Middletown Township Police Department, there are several gunshot victims, and it is unknown at this time if they are targeted or random. We, of course, will continue to follow this breaking news and provide you any updates as we receive them. We are going to step away for our final 2-minute break of the hour, but we will be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox, and we continue to follow all of the top stories here at home and around the world. Gang violence continues to surge in Haiti amid political turmoil as the humanitarian crisis also grows. Around 1.4 million Haitians are on the verge of famine. That's according to aid groups. And starting late last month, gangs began attacking key institutions, burning police stations, shutting down the main international airport with gunfire, and also storming 2 prisons, releasing more than 4,000 inmates. The violence forcing the Haitian prime minister to announce that he would resign once a transitional council is created. Gangs, though, demanding his resignation, have continued their attacks on several communities. This also comes as another group of Marines arrived in Haiti this week to bolster security at the U.S. Embassy at the Haitian capital right there. The Pentagon says they will relieve forces already stationed there, adding the Marines were not deployed to help Americans escape. Joining me now is former U.S. Ambassador to Haiti, Pamela White. And Ambassador White, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is a very concerning situation in Haiti. Gangs have pretty much taken control of the country. The prime minister forced to shut down, and he wasn't even in the country when this happened. Can you give us the very latest about what is going on?
Yeah, well, I can give you from where I'm sitting here in South Carolina what I'm talking to many, many people in Haiti. They're very distressed, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to make a couple of points. And one is I talked to Guy Philippe yesterday, and I know that he's sort of put as being one of the bad boys, but in my opinion, he's someone that can help with the situation, and I believe we should be dealing with him. We dealt with the Duvaliers for 20 plus years. We can certainly deal with Guy Philippe. He's charismatic, he's bright, he's articulate, and he has many, many people that are following him, and I think he can be part of the solution. I think that even Barbecue, Jimmy C, can be part of the solution. I don't think that 1,000 Kenyan troops for the tune of $237 million are going to turn the situation around in Haiti. And my last really important point is this new 7-person council, transition council. I don't know transition to what, because we're in a total failed state in Haiti. But in any case, if one of the people that are appointed on that 7-person council are the elite, the names that we have heard, the political elite, the private sector elite, even one, the people that have mansions in the hills of Port-au-Prince, Petronville and above, the people who have mansions in Florida and send their kids to Ivy League schools. Those people, if there's even one, it's going to fail, dead on arrival. So I don't know who the names are. I don't know who's being considered. I have not any clue, but I do know that if it's the elites, the old-time elites that have been running Haiti not well for 50, 60, 70 years, that's not going to fly.
You make such interesting points, and you did mention the names of 2 of the top gang leaders. And what's so interesting is you're saying bring them to the table, but that really has been the focal point, is that these gangs really have been running Haiti, and they want a seat at the leadership table. They feel that they can do better. And you were mentioning that if the elite continue to rule Haiti, it will just not work. So how do you bring such divided groups at the table and give people a voice, a seat?
Yeah, exactly. That's what they want. That's what they were talking about. That's why they didn't like Henri. He represented the elite to them. Neurosurgeon, been around politics in Haiti for years and years and years. I mean, he was not considered their representative for years. This just didn't happen in the last 2 months. This has been at least 2.5 years. So, yeah, they have got to be brought to the table. I don't think they need to appear on international TV necessarily. I don't think they're even asking for that. But my one last point I gotta make sure I make, and that is this, transition to democracy is to what? Let's just get a transition to some kind of stability so we can bring in food aid and medicine and water to people who are starving. I mean, we seem to be ready to build no matter new ports and piers and whatever in Gaza, but people that are an hour and a half away from Miami are starving. They're near starvation, famine, and a country right next to us. We have hundreds of thousands of Haitians in the United States who are willing to help. That's another thing I don't think has been tapped enough in this growing up. But right now, the United States should not go, nor anybody else, any of the donors or whomever, should be worried about the transition to democracy or when elections will be held in Haiti. Probably should be 2 or 3 years. What we should be worried about is how we get aid into the country. We have to establish humanitarian corridors. And I think, I may be naive, although I'm way too old to be naive, but I think if we bring the gang leaders to the table, if we bring Guy Philippe to the table, I don't care where the table is, it can be the kitchen table, it can be under the table, then we might start figuring out a way to do that, at least.
And what you also brought up was so important is that this all stems from the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Haiti. So many people are just desperate, right? And this is where I feel like that violence stems from, is people are desperate. And so the gangs have stepped in and, taken over the country. But again, as you mentioned, what this boils down to is that ongoing humanitarian crisis. And when people feel like they have no other choice, that's when these sort of situations evolve. You also mentioned a very good point, that this didn't start just a short time ago, that this has been ever evolving. And as you know, back in 2010, there was the devastating earthquake, and it has just escalated there. Any final thoughts? You have such interesting insight in an important experience. Any last thoughts for our Live Now from Fox viewers as we continue to follow these developments in Haiti?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. You're doing a really good job. And this morning I was up early at 6 listening to all the news shows, and I didn't see one mention of Haiti, and it just tears my heart, because they are dying. We've got to do something. So thank you for your reporting. I know that CNN just got a reporter in there yesterday, and he's doing a good job too. But we need to keep the pressure on getting the humanitarian help in there. People are on death's door.
And those last words, it's so powerful. It drives home the urgency that needs to happen, not just in Haiti, but as you mentioned, really, this is an international problem. Haiti is a very small country, but a very big need. And you also mentioned the very large Haitian population here in the United States. We're stationed in Florida. And of course, as you know, Florida has the largest Haitian population in the United States. So again, a very important topic, and no doubt, Ambassador White, we will be asking you to come on here Live Now from Fox more to talk about these developments, because such critical points that we need to continue that discussion on. So we appreciate you taking the time on this Saturday morning.
Thank you so much. I'll see you later, I hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. And have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, you too.
All right, so we do want to transition to this live look right here. And of course, as we promised, we are continuing to follow all of these fun festivities here on Live Now from Fox as we take a live look at the Chicago River right there. And again, you can see the massive amounts of crowds. This is on a perhaps chilly Saturday morning here in Chicago. But again, this is a live look at the Chicago River, as any moment now we are expecting those boats to be dyeing the river green. And so we're going to pause. We're going to hang on this incredible aerial shot as we bring you this coverage of the Chicago River getting dyed green. So again, this is going to happen any moment now. This was scheduled for 11 a.m. But again, as you know, these events tend to sometimes get delayed just a little bit. But what a gorgeous morning there in Chicago. We have seen tens of thousands of people pack along the riverbanks right there. So let's just hang with this, enjoy this view, and of course, see when those boats are going to be dyeing the river green. All right. So again, we continue to follow this. We have another live look, though, that we want to get to because, again, this is from a different vantage point right here. So take a look at this. This is just another look. And again, on the other angle, it seems as though we are waiting for this ship to come. So we're going to take both of these shots. But take a look at this. You can see happening right now, live right there on your screen. The river getting dyed, that incredible, just neon green right there. And don't worry, if you're worried about this dye, it is eco-friendly. It's not going to harm the river. It's not going to harm the environment. Believe me, these folks who have done this for years, they have made sure that everything's going to be safe. But again, these are, and just to give you a little bit background, they're dumping about 100 pounds of environmentally friendly dye right now into the Chicago River. And I do want to show you this because, again, we have access to all sorts of fantastic cameras right here. But this is a look as they have finished dyeing the river green here. But take a look at this. We're going to change to another camera. This is actually the boat right there that is dumping all of that green. And you can see that it is going under that bridge right there. But I mean, this is just amazing. And it's just so much fun. If you've never experienced this live, I've actually never seen the dyeing of the river itself green, but I have gone to Chicago for the actual St. Patrick's Day, and just seeing this in person really is an event. I mean, it's just so much fun. But take a look. That is the boat. A little speedboat right there, and you can see that they're dumping that dye right there in its wake, and it's just amazing. It's just